Over all the USA, the fiery cross we display, the emblem of Klansmen's domain, will be forever true to the red, white, and blue, and Americans always remain. So I'll cherish the bright fiery cross, till from duties at last I lay down. Then burn o'er me a bright fiery cross, the day I am laid in the ground. To the bright fiery cross I will ever be true, all blame and reproach gladly bear, and friendship will show to each Klansman I know, its glory forever will share. So I'll cherish the bright fiery cross, till from duties at last I lay down. Then burn o'er me a bright fiery cross, the day I am laid in the ground. Oh, the bright fiery cross, so despised by a few, has a wondrous attraction for me. When I leave here someday for my home far away, may a bright fiery cross beam for me. So I'll cherish the bright fiery cross, till from duties at last I lay down. Then burn o'er me a bright fiery cross, the day I am laid in the ground.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you all for being here today. Today we're going to talk about, that's right, we're talking about the KKK in their own words. This is Sunday service number 128, the KKK in their own words. And all right, before we get going, let's do a little caveat here, okay? Because we're going to need to do this before we launch into this. Number one, this is going to be a long live stream. There's no getting around it. It's just going to have to be long. It is what it is. I want to do this in one shot, and so it could go to noon, 1, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours it might be. This is something that you're probably going to have to watch multiple times, just because of the amount of stuff that we're going to cover today, okay? You're going to have to watch this more than once, chances are. So just so you know, if you have tuned in and be like, well, I don't want to sit through 3 hours, you might have to sit through 6, okay? So if you really want it. Disclaimer, this is a disclaimer for everybody watching, a disclaimer for YouTube. YouTube, you're not fucking touching this. YouTube, you're not fucking touching this, okay? What we're doing today will be is for educational purposes, obviously. We are the Gnostic Church and Academy of Lord Jesus Christ. So this service today is going to be definitely more the academic, the more scholarly, the more we're here to learn and that sort of thing, okay? Less than a Sunday service, if you will, okay? So this is for educational purposes only. This is what we're not here to like promote white supremacy or whatever it is, right? We're here to actually just go through the alleged history that we were taught and show what we always teach and we always talk about, that history is bullshit. It's bullshit. Everything that we're taught about it is flipped on its head. It's inverted, and we're going to see it today, okay? So I will be saying the word nigger today, and I will be using it in reference to articles and quotes and things like that, which I have absolutely right to do. I'm not necessarily bashing on blacks or anything like that. They'll be bashing on some blacks today. We might even get to the Irish too, but and some whites. We're going to bash on all sorts of people as we do. So YouTube, don't fucking touch this. Just because I say a word, we're using it. This is extremely academic. This is scholarly, okay? So just put your, calm down, all right? So there's that. Okay, last thing, this is going to probably challenge some people's beliefs in a lot of these things, and that's fine. It might not for some people, but, that's what it is, okay? John Vina, after I posted The Birth of a Nation, the movie synopsis, just yesterday, he posted this. He said, hey, it's very interesting. I watched this, and earlier this year I read The Real Lincoln by Thomas DiLorenzo. Very interesting book, and much of it detailed how the North by the powers of Lincoln and his generals, used African Americans, the blacks, people to ransack and burn southern cities to the ground and use carpetbaggers, and we'll tell you what carpetbaggers is, to essentially enslave the South. Okay? And that's what we're going to find today, that the North used the black in order to destroy the South. And then they did it under this umbrella of slavery and all this other stuff. And we'll cover all of that today. Very much in line with this movie synopsis, other than that he left out the KKK. And like I said, we're going to be talking about the KKK today. But we're going to read in their own words. We've all heard the story about the evil KKK, and they were murderers, and they were lynching people, and they hated the blacks, and they were just blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, that's the story that we've heard from the victors, if you will. Now let's hear the story from the KKK in their own words, okay? And so, once again, this is basically just a history lesson. So, YouTube, leave your fucking hands off this video, okay? There's that. So, okay, what we're going to be covering today, just basically a summary, okay? Number one, we're going to look at the harmony of blacks and whites in the South before the war, the antebellum, which basically means before the war, right? We're going to look at the fact that there was a harmony of blacks and whites in the South, okay? We're going to see that there was a genteel Southern hospitality, that there was this aura of, like, taking care of your family, taking care of the nation, taking care of your community, taking care of one another in the South. And that absolutely persists even to today. We're also going to see that there was a harmony of the Northern and Southern people, okay? We're going to see that America was predominantly white and Protestant during the Civil War, and that they were trying to keep their country predominantly white and Protestant. We're also going to see that slavery was not what it has been sold as. Slavery was also worldwide, okay? It wasn't just in the America and the evil South with the white man, okay? We're going to see that the government instigated the race war in the South, or we should say factions within the government, of course, people that were working against, the good people of the nation through the government, of course. The South wanted to secede, we're going to find out, because of the corruption of the federal government, okay? Wow, I wonder if that's happening today. This North said the South could not secede, and then drummed up and stirred up the reason to go to war, which was mainly slavery. It was like, the Southern, they hated the blacks down there, and that's why we need to go and absolutely decimate the South, okay? The North were capitalists, the South were agriculturalists. Basically, what you find out is that these were essentially two different groups of people, and that the Union was being forced, while the South were being like, we want to do our own shit. The North was like, no, you're not. You're coming with us, you Negro haters. The North paid soldiers, blacks, all sorts of different people, a bunch of immigrants, and many of those blacks that were raised in the South to cause chaos and havoc. So the North also implanted blacks within the government to specifically overrun the whites, and this is what was happening in the Civil War, okay? In a predominantly white country. We'll talk about that. Also, the KKK is the response to all of this. What we're going to see is that the KKK is a response to the government essentially going corrupt, causing race wars, not allowing the true principles of the Constitution to, be promoted and that sort of stuff. So, okay. So we're going to cover a lot today. Like I said, strap in. Why are we doing this? Few things. Number one, we just like to put the record straight. Number one. Number two, what we're going to see is that the KKK, as we do education here, okay? So we do religious education. That's one of the top things that I've been doing for literally 13 years now, teaching people about religious topics, okay? Well, guess what the KKK was? It was extremely religious. They were Protestant, okay? So in order to look at our history and look at, the lies of our history and then go and try to suss out what actually happened, one of the things we're going to come to is the fact that, hey, the KKK, they were very religious. They absolutely believed in God, okay? And so it's pretty appropriate for us as a church and an academy to cover this sort of thing. Like I said, YouTube, don't fucking touch this. This is Reverend Harry G. Knowles. It was the First Christian Church, Little Rock. He delivered his famous lecture, The Ku Klux Klan, and what it stands for. Actually, and I'm only going to cover, I think, 2 of them, but there was probably like 3 or 4 different ones of these, of articles that I found in the National Archives, where basically like these preachers were coming out and being like, look, the government's lying about the KKK. What you think about the KKK is absolute nonsense. We're going to listen to what they have to say in their own words, and that sort of stuff. And then they were defending it, these Christian preachers who were not even part of the KKK. Okay, so this is what this one guy said. This is a Methodist, and he said, actually, this is a different one, sorry. This is Dr. Hillis defends the secrecy of the Klan. Noted Brooklyn pastor stirs up congregation in sermon on the Ku Klux Klan. He goes on to say that the Reverend Newell Dwight Hillis is one of the most noted preachers of America, and on Sunday evening, December 3rd, delivered one of the most masterful sermons ever heard in Brooklyn and devoted practically the entire time of his discourse to the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. In opening his address, Dr. Hillis exhibited a sheaf of telegrams stating that there were some 250 messages in the lot, that there were replies and receives to him by telegram that he had sent, that had been sent to mayors and sheriffs and other public officials of towns and stuff like that, and cities in the United States where supposed the Ku Klux Klan had outrages and that sort of stuff, and they basically all these letters like, oh my God, look at what they're doing and stuff like that. Well, he investigated it himself. And as he held the telegrams in his hand, he said that every reply received contained specific denials from mayors, sheriffs, and other public officials that the outrages were in every way traceable to the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. His sermon made a tremendous impression on the audience. This is what he says. Multitudes of criminal charges have been brought against the KKK, but thus far our best newspapers in running down these charges have not found anywhere north of the Mason-Dixon line any conclusive proof of these alleged crimes, nor apparently has there been one crime by the KKK established before a court of law. So basically, while you had all this hoopla, all the North, the newspapers in the North, they were pushing out propaganda, being like, these are the evil Negro haters, and they're going and they're causing outrages and hanging, and then they go, and this guy's, he goes and he actually talks to the mayors, he goes to talk to the sheriffs, he goes to talk to the leaders of the city. He's like, is this actually happening? No, it's not. It's lies. This editor has been favored recently by being permitted to look over the documentary evidence to the tenets, principles, and aims of the KKK. He finds that this organization stands with positive emphasis for Americanism as opposed to foreign idealism. Interesting. In America, huh? For the principles of the Christian religion as opposed to Roman Catholicism and infidelity. We're going to see that the Protestants, of course, but the KKK were against Roman Catholicism, the rule of the Pope and things like that, basically, because they understood that the Catholic Church was corrupt as fuck. Duh. Right? So for the American public schools, and so basically the KKK were for the American public schools and for placing a holy Bible in the schoolrooms of this nation, for the enforcement of the laws upon the statute books, and for wholesome respect of the Constitution of the United States. God, how evil. For the maintenance of virtue among American women, sobriety and honor among American men, and for the eradication of all agencies and influences that would threaten the character of our children. You mean like the ADL, and you mean like all of the organizations that are completely pushing like DEI and shit like that? You mean like that? You mean the KKK were trying to stop shit like that back in the day? Interesting. So the principles of the Klan were not so damnable as pictured, it would seem. Everything that you know about the Ku Klux Klan has been brought to you by propagandists, by people that wanted to place into your head that these were the most evil, Negro-hating people in the world, and they were just dumb fucking Southerners, and that was it. And what you're going to find out today is that's absolute bullshit. Americans are, and this guy was defending secret societies in America, just like I do. Americans are constitutionally opposed to secrecy, but they are not prejudiced against the secret fraternities in our colleges or the secret ceremonies of the Masons, the secret oaths of the Knights of Columbus, by the way, which are Jesuits, the secret Hebrew societies, the secrecy of the Elks, or the International Order of the Oddfellows, and they are even intellectually hospitable toward the fact that the banks and stores and railways keep their private books, and that the law defends them in locking up their secrets so their opponents cannot discover them. So while everybody's out there hating on secret, they keep secret societies, shit like that. There's a long history of America recognizing that secrecy was actually a part of the American ideal. Banks, railways, stores, they all keep their secrets. They all meet in secret. So do these other organizations. But you see those guys, bad. You see these other secret society or these other, institutions and like that, no problem whatsoever. Okay? So the first thing that people will say when they look at the KKK, they're like, well, look at them. They're fucking retarded. Look at them. They're wearing all these funny hats and they wear the white robes and stuff like that. And they call themselves Grand Cyclops and Imperial Wizard. I mean, what a bunch of Southern retards, right? Okay, well, we look at this and a lot of people look at this and look how campy and ridiculous all of these outfits are and things like that. Okay, well, what about these guys? Okay, how about... up on the left there, I think that's the Knights of Pythia up on the left there, wearing their weird garb. And of course, on the very right, there's the Freemasons. Of course, on the lower right there's the Eastern Orthodox. On the left, that's actually the Knights of Columbus. And look at their furry hats and shit like that. Look at that. It's all funny. It's every religion and secret order and fraternal organization, stuff like that. A lot of them have their garb, they have their outfits, they have their things that they wear that part of their tradition. And it's easy to look at this stuff and not know anything about it, as so many truthers do, and be like, look at how stupid this is. We all know who the stupid one is now. We all know who the stupid people are now that are just ripping on this shit without having any understanding of what it actually means, okay? Now we all know, of course, even the Jews, they have their, and Jennifer and I we were noticing this, that we have an acorn in our, you see this, the Jews funny hat on the top there? See that there? So the Jews are very naturalist because they actually look to nature further. So if you look at an acorn, it's like, you see that? It's like the Jew funny hat, like, da 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 da. Anyway, so secret societies have been a part of the American idealism, and this is why I defend them so heavily and so heartily, because I studied them and I know what they're actually all about, okay? Secret societies were prevalent in America. This is a book by W.S. Harwood, I think. The membership of this, listen to this, in 1896, right? After, essentially 30 years or something like that after the Civil War. The membership of the secret fraternal orders of the United States in the month of December 1896 was in round numbers 5,400,000, just shy of 6 mil. Taking the adult male population of the nation at the present time to be 19 million and allowing that some men belong to more or one order, it will seem that, broadly speaking, every fifth or possibly every eighth man you meet is identified with some fraternal organization. You walk down the street back in the turn of the century, and literally every fifth, sixth, eighth person, man, was part of a secret order. For the preservation of whose secrets he has given solemn oath, a pledge more binding in nature than perhaps any other known among men. There's about 500,000 members of a secret military order called the GAR, or which is known as the Grand Army of the Republic, which we'll cover today. Nor has any account been taken of the many thousands who are identified with fraternities in the colleges. Fraternal organizations, colleges, Freemasonry, International Order of the Oddfellows, Knights of Pythia, Knights of Columbus, you just go down the list, was a prevalent theme in America. Now, we have a dumbed-down society that looks at all this and be like, secret's bad, and then they don't open the books, they don't venture into any, and actually understanding any of this stuff, and then we live in ignorance, and that's unacceptable for me. So, while everybody's laughing at people like this and, you know, like, oh, look at all this, look at these KKK and the stupid outfits, and then look at these guys in the stupid outfits. Meanwhile, you have no problem with a bunch of, you know, people taking LSD and going to a fish show and wearing shit like that. Look at these clowns. You're going to make, this is fine for most people, but this, I'd rather wear that shit. It's probably more comfortable, too. And at least you don't look like a fucking tard. So, okay, so let's do the history of the KKK as according to the people that are trying to put down the KKK, right? The historians, right? There's 4 parts to this, so like I said, strap in. The first Ku Klux Klan originated after the American Civil War, okay? After the American Civil War, there was this Reconstruction period, and basically the KKK arose from this, and we'll cover that today. A second generation, because the KKK was considered this terrorist organization by the United States government, by the North or whatever, so they basically disbanded the KKK, and then it reemerged several years later in 1910s. A second generation or iteration of the Klan emerged in the 1910s and the early 1920s. Unlike the early Klan, the second KKK was more public and visible, often holding activities geared towards festivities, pageants, and social gatherings. They did fucking parades and stuff, and had like, you know, bake-offs and stuff. The focus shifted to encouraging native-born white Americans to believe that racial intimidation, harassment, and non-legal violence was essential to Americanism and patriotism, as we'll see that that's nonsense, okay? Many historians cite the release of D.W. Griffith's film, which we'll watch a synopsis of today, The Birth of a Nation, as a basis for the rejuvenation of the Klan. When the film premiered in Atlanta, William J. Simmons and 15 other white men lit a cross aflame on Stone Mountain outside of Atlanta, serving to announce the rebirth of the Knights of Columbus, or excuse me, the Ku Klux Klan. So they were outside Georgia, Stone Mountain. They put this big cross up during the release of this film called The Birth of a Nation, okay? And basically the birth of the nation, as we'll see today, tells an accurate portrayal of what was actually going on in America. The history books aren't telling you that shit. First dude, this fucking legend. Look at this guy. Look at this fucking legend. This guy is Nathan Bradford Forrest, I think is his name, is the name. And he was the original founder of the KKK, okay? After, then all of a sudden it was disbanded, I think in like 1896, they said, and then it was brought back in by this guy, William J. Simmons, in 1910, roughly around there, something like that, okay? And this is Colonel William J. Simmons, and he was a colonel. This guy actually is pretty well decorated. This is the book that he put, The Fiery Summons. This was like the first Ku Klux Klan book, basically, that they put out, pamphlet that they put out, trying to get people to join. Colonel William J. Simmons was a professor of Southern history at Lanier University in Atlanta, is the founder of the rejuvenated KKK, the construction of which has been planning for many years. This guy had been planning this for a long time because he basically watched as his country was being overtaken by a bunch of, like, what, quote unquote capitalists or whatever, but North people that were completely destroying the foundation of the country, the foundation of the Constitution itself. They were committing terrorist acts within the government and things like that. And we'll see all this. The petition was accepted on Thanksgiving in 1915. The organizers of the Klan assembled on top of the giant granite boulder known as Stone Mountain near Atlanta, and there at midnight, under a blazing fiery cross, the symbol of the old Klan took the oath of allegiance to this new invisible empire. Okay. So, and what does Colonel Simmons have to say about the Klan? He says this. Once again, this is in their own words. Take it or leave it or whatever. We're just going to listen to what they have to say because we've been only given one little aspect of history, one little side of history. Well, here's the other one, okay? On the contrary, says Colonel Simmons, the members of the KKK were men of the highest type as a body, and they were working to safeguard life and property, to ameliorate the terrible conditions growing out of the presence of the carpetbaggers and their baneful influence over the Negro. The carpetbagger is basically a guy who comes, a politician or whatever, that comes down to the South from the North and basically tries to, overthrow essentially the policies and the government of the South, that sort of thing. Okay, so after the Ku Klux Klan was disbanded by General Nathan B. Forrest, who was its chief, bands of thugs and murderers began operating throughout the South under the name of the Ku Klux Klan. So when the Klan was disbanded, basically what you had is the government going in through the FBI, CIA, or whatever it was, at the time, dressing up as Klan members, then actually committing crimes, and then blaming it on the Klan. And the Klan the entire time were saying, that's not us. This is the fucking government that we were talking about that was corrupt. Okay, they had, this Ku Klux Klan had no organization, had no legal standing, and it was the members of the original Klan who did more than any others to suppress the operation of these lawless characters. These fake Ku Klux Klan were being called out by the real Ku Klux Klan, being like, look, this is essentially government terrorism under this guise, under this cloak of us, and it's not us. Of course, who believed it at the time? Why would you believe a bunch of Negro haters? He defends the original Klan in this connection. Colonel Simmons took occasion to point out that the original KKK was not a band of bandits and cutthroats as foes of the South and enemies of the Southern people so frequently have charged. A band of murderers who stopped at nothing and who whipped and terrorized both white and black and vented its spite on whoever incurred its displeasure. Basically, the KKK, according to their own words, being like, these are lies about us. This is lies right from the government that we were calling out before the Civil War, saying it's corrupt as fuck. I wonder, is that government still in charge today? Come on, people. Come on. Various Klan strongholds included in the South, but also in the Midwest and West, and large presence both in Indiana. There was a lot of, allegedly, there was like literally millions of Klan members, right? Then this new Klan that comes up in the 1910s, similar to the earlier Klan, the new Klan participated in lynchings and beatings and other forms of vigilant violence. And the Klan are saying, no, it was actually the government dressed up as us in order to destroy the predominantly white Protestant South. And that's actually what happened. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4. And what we're going to do is we're going to go before the war. We're going to look at the war itself. We're going to look at the Reconstruction era. And then we're going to go through a bunch of articles by the KKK themselves and say, hey, this is what we're saying. This is what happened. And this is our claims to history. We were taught the other claims of history is like, well, they were all a bunch of Negro haters and that sort of, and they just went around lynching and beating people. Not according to them. So, we're going to cover everything, okay? So, before the war, this is what America looked like before the Civil War, of course. We hadn't traveled out west yet, but basically it says here, America was unofficially already split into two countries before the actual succession in 1860, and before the North sent down invading armies to impose their will on a people that wanted to be left alone. This is what most people don't understand about the South, and we'll cover it today. We were taught in history, is like, they just wanted to keep all the Negroes, and they loved the slavery, and blah, 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 and they just wanted to be all, that sort of thing. And it's like, that's not the case at all. Basically, what happened in the South is they realized that the North was, they were importing loads of immigrants. They had more money. They were literally dominating the politics, so that anything that was going on, like in the government in the North, they were enforcing it in the South, which wasn't actually, in line with what the South wanted, right? Basically, you had two different countries, okay? And the South at the time were saying, hey, we want to split. And the North are saying, you're not going anywhere. And then they drummed up a war based on race relations, which they created in the first place in order to absolutely destroy the genteel Southern hospitality of the South, right? So in terms of power dynamics in the current year, the main thing that has changed since that, we now, we don't need to go into that, but basically that's what it looked like. Those were two separate countries, okay? Now, American was in the turn of the century, right, was Protestant, okay? Like 1900s, 1850 to 1900s, that sort of stuff. America was white and Protestant, dominate, okay? There's no question about it. One of the three major branches of Christianity originating in the 16th century Reformation, of course, was, the 95 Thesis on the frickin' door and Martin Luther and that sort of stuff, and this caused the Reformation and things like that. And basically why, we'll cover that whole thing at some point. But why did the Lutherans and that it became the Protestants and stuff like that, why did he knock that shit on the door and be like, hey, because the Catholic Church is corrupt as fuck. You're corrupt as fuck. You're probably diddling the children. We're going our own way, in a nutshell, okay? And so Protestantism is, of course, these are all the denominations that came from Protestantism, right? Which is a total fucking mess. Don't get me wrong, right? But there's a reason that the Protestant religion sprang up. Let's just state the obvious. Protestants absolutely dominated the American religion around the turn of the century. About 2/3 of all folks born around 1900 were raised in a Protestant household. Were white and raised in a Protestant household. This was 100 years ago. Now look at our population now. This is just in the 1960s. The dark red there is all white, which would, Anglo-Saxon white, that sort of stuff. That's in the 1960s. Now rewind to the 1860s. Okay? This is 2020. The dark blue there is quote unquote white people. So these KKK Protestant white people were saying, hey, there's this influx of immigration. There's this North, which is completely corrupt in the government. They're overtaking the South. They're trying to basically take our nation and destroy it. Take what would be the supremacy of the white people, which is actually what was going on at the time. It was a white country. Take it and destroy it. That's exactly what happened. Now, we know that this white demographic decline is it's not like a conspiracy theory or anything like that. Everywhere in the world where there are quote-unquote Anglo-Saxon or quote-unquote white people, whatever you want to say, the white population is being completely decimated. Guess what? The KKK were saying that back in the day. They were saying that this is what the government was doing. So, white demographic decline can be observed in other countries. Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Germany, Spain, Italy, France, and of course all over Europe, in Canada, America. What is it? It's less white people. You see on the commercials, you see black people mating with white people. They force it. They push it in your face, of course. The last days of the white world, The Guardian says, as if this is like a positive thing. Okay? The geography, of white population loss. You got to be less white. America's becoming more urban, more diverse, and less white. And they always say this, PBS, the Guardian, the Atlantic, whatever. They always say this shit as if it's a good thing. Now, there's, of course, as we know, they never talk about the far left. They always talk about the far right. And it's always the worst thing in the world is what? White supremacy, right? That's the worst thing in the world. There's no other problem in any other country if you want to promote in Africa, if you want to promote being black. It's like, we're dominant, we're black, and we want to have black cities and black religious institutions and black this. And you go to China, they're like, we want Chinese shit, and we want the Chinese institutions, we want to speak a Chinese language. You go to Japan, we want Japanese shit, we want Japanese language. And there's no other problem in any other country. But if you claim you're white, you're an extremist and you need to be dealt with. The power of the United States government is going to crush your race. That's what's happening. There's no disagreeing about it. And of course, we know the double standards of this. It's only racist if a white person does it or a white person says it. You know how long this has been going on? Since the introduction of slavery. This is, just think about this. Just think about this. When I said in 1960, when you look at the entire population, it was essentially mainly white, even back then. On there wasn't until 1967 that blacks could even intermarry with a white. It was generally expected, and it wasn't even like a risque thing or anything, that even we say, okay, slavery was bad. Yes, duh, of course. I think we all understand that slavery's bad, duh, right? But just because, even if you had slavery, like, no, so we're going to get rid of slavery, abolitionists, all that sort of shit. Even after that, it wasn't like the North were like, come blacks, come mate with our white people. Come up, we're going to free you, and then come up and start families with us, and come to our schools and shit like that. No, the North still were like, no, we're going to segregate. It was expected. Why? Well, because you were promoting your own race, which is a good thing. Blacks promote blacks, and whites promote whites, and Japanese promote Japanese, and the Vietnamese promote Vietnamese, that sort of thing. Okay? And we all know that, once again, pro-black isn't anti-white. That's empowerment, man. Pro-white isn't anti-black. Nah, you're a racist. If you're pro-white, it's like, yes, pro-white people, you're just immediately racist. But you can say it with literally any other race. That has been planted into your head. Okay, so now let's talk about, this is once again, we're talking about before the Civil War, what it looked like before the Civil War. And now we're going to learn about the Civil War through this bad motherfucker named Albert Pike. Okay, now, once again, I just posted the video called The Fall of Albert Pike. Albert Pike was part of the KKK. He was actually known here. Actually says here, among the leading members of the original KKK was General Albert Pike of Arkansas, who was the chief judicial officer of General Nathan B. Forrest. He was like literally right under the first guy that started KKK. Grand Wizard of the original Ku Klux Klan, General Pike was a native of Massachusetts but moved to Arkansas. And at the outbreak of the Civil War, he cast his fortunes with the armies of the Confederacy. He fought for the South. Why? Because he knew that the North was corrupt. He knew that the government was completely corrupt. He knew that there was race wars. He knew that they had tons more capital. He knew that they were bringing in immigration. He knew that the North was going to be pushing towards the West and was going to deny the South their ability to push, to basically, gather more lands and stuff like that, right? Enlisting as a private, he rose rapidly and entered the rank of brigadier general. He became noted throughout the world for his authoritative work on masonry, and yes, he does have authoritative work on masonry. He's a bad motherfucker, Albert Pike is, okay? You actually read what he has to say. The guy was the shit, okay? So there's the Albert Pike statue, and of course we did the fall of Albert Pike, and this is what's left, and it's like, he was just racist, and he hated all the Negroes and the Indians, and they were from the South. This is a bunch of absolutely fucking monkeys, uneducated, ignorant monkeys, trashing something that they don't understand. And that's what we talked about in the fall of Albert Pike, okay? Now, what did Albert Pike, to talk about race relations, what was going on before the Civil War in the South, what did Albert Pike have to actually say about race relations? Most people be like, yeah, he hated the Negroes, and if he ever had to go with the Negroes, he was going to quit masonry and shit. All these fabricated quotes that have no source whatsoever. What did Albert Pike, the Southern general under the guy that started the KKK, have to say about blacks himself that you can look up yourself? Pike was considered by his contemporaries as being one of the least racially biased individuals of his time. During his military service in the U.S. Civil War, he chose to lead only native troops. Only native Indian troops. Something others eschewed because of the perception that Indians were subhuman. Not Albert Pike. His position on slavery is sometimes assumed because of his service in the Confederacy, yet the assumption reflects ignorance of the beliefs of a well-read gentleman living in the South and feeling an obligation to support his country. The status of Negro Masonry in this country was perhaps never better defined than it was by Albert Pike in 1875, when Albert Pike notably said this, provably said this: Prince Hall Lodge was a regular lodge as any lodge created by competent authority. It had a perfect right to establish other lodges and make itself the mother lodge. Do you know what Prince Hall Masonry is? It's exclusively black masonry. So the guy that's right under the head of the KKK came out specifically and said, those Negroes have a right to join our institution, have their own lodges, have them explicitly black lodges, because at the time segregation was, there wasn't a problem. And when you think about it, blacks were like, we want to promote our black shit, so therefore we're going to have a black lodge and we're going to invite our black leaders in, and that's what it's going to be. And then those guys could have their white lodge. That was, according to the blacks and the whites, totally fucking fine. It's well-known history within Masonry. It's Prince Hall Masonry. It's black masonry. Pike was saying this in 1875. He wasn't saying, the Negroes, we need to hang them all. No. Pike, as it said, fought with the natives in the Civil War. Blacks and Native Americans fought the North in the Civil War. Wait, what? The work of Albert Pike. Many leaders of the 5 tribes welcomed the formation of the Confederate States in America in February 1861. Many leaders, the leaders of 5 tribes, multiple different tribes in the South, welcomed the formation of the Confederate States of America. Why? Because the Indian tribes knew what was going on in the North as well. I'll show you that. It moved... The Confederacy, as it was well known, consisted of the southern states that seceded, withdrawn from the United States, and moved quickly to take advantage of this sentiment. Confederate President Jefferson Davis appointed Albert Pike, a prominent Arkansas attorney, editor, and Freemason, to negotiate treaties with the tribes. He went out to negotiate treaties with the tribes. Do you know what he ended up doing? He ended up fighting on the ground with natives and blacks. This was supposed to be the racist guy. Why the fuck were Native Americans fighting with Southern slave owners in the South? Maybe it's because what we've been taught about history is bullshit. Here's Indians that are fighting for the South. You can pause this and scroll in and all this other stuff. But basically, besides tribes for a part, what does it say here? Basically, you can just read this. But basically, what it is there was an attack on Pea Ridge, which was one of the biggest battles, right? And you had literally, the numbers vary, but you had anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 Native American Indians fighting with the South against the North. Facts. So this is the Indians' fight at Pea Ridge. Sketch of the most uncivilized battle of the Civil War, the people from the North said. Indians take a hand and help the South. The black slave owners in the South were helping, right, where the Indians were helping them fight the North. Federal and Confederate armies fight 2 days and then withdraw for portraits of the leaders of both sides. Albert Pike's Indians used tomahawks and scalping knives. So, were the Indians just so stupid that this big, tall, burly fucking white Freemason comes along and be like, hey, you dumb Indians, come fight and die with us. And then after that, we'll enslave you or some shit. Does that make any sense whatsoever? Did you know that there was black soldiers in the Civil War? Loads of information out there that you can verify this yourself that shows that blacks in the South fought with white men to protect the Southern rights. That goes completely against the historical narrative that we were told, right? No. Do you know how many blacks actually, I think this is it. By the end of the Civil War, roughly 180,000 black men, 10% of the army, served as soldiers in the United States Army. And another 19,000 served in the Navy for the South. Rough numbers or whatever, but basically that's 10% of the Union Army. Now you could say, well, they were all enslaved and then the white man came and forced them to fight and stuff like that. Would they even be good soldiers if they were forced to fight and that sort of stuff? But beyond that, the whole notion is like, well, if they could either run to the North and be safe with the Northerners and be protected and loved for being an African American, then why didn't they do that? No, instead they took up arms and fought for the South. That goes completely against the entire narrative that we were taught about the South, about what was going on, about the race relations. Okay? Blacks stuck around the South during the Civil War. This is I don't have the guy's name for this, but he was looking up his ancestors and things like that, and then found out that his black ancestors that were slaves, that they hung around during the Civil War and even after the Civil War. Does that make any sense? All of these people and their descendants continued to live in slaveholding Virginia even during the Civil War. Why didn't my great-great-great-grandparents run away to the safety in the North rather than remain in the Potomac Valley region of slaveholding Western Virginia? I don't get it. Why didn't Grandpapa run? Free Negroes headed north just as soon as they could, right? Didn't my ancestors' decision to stay put in the Confederacy run counter to what we all understood about the history of slavery? This is a black man saying this. He's looking in his history and he's finding that, hey, my slave owner parents or great-great-great-grandparents or whatever stuck around slaveholders. What? In that raging year of Lincoln's election and Southern secession, there was a total roughly of about 500,000, 488,000 free blacks living in the United States. How did free blacks get here in the first place? There's a question. Did you know that some of those free blacks were once slaves? Well, if they were slaves, how did they become free? What's going on? Of those, 226,000 lived in the North and 261,000 in the South. Free black men, more than the North, decided willfully to live in the South. A few months before the Confederacy was born, there was 35,000, basically 36,000 more free black people living in the slave-owning South than in the North. And they stayed there during the Civil War. Not only did they stay there, but they actually helped the women and the children and stuff like that, helped with, reserves and army uniforms and keeping the society going and stuff like that. That's what they were doing. They had every opportunity, according to our history, to run to the North to the black lovers in the North. It's bullshit. It's 100% bullshit. Now, Pike, this actually, right before and this is what we covered in the fall of Albert Pike, Albert Pike absolutely made this clear in his book. This was State or Province, Bond or Free. This was an article, basically a pamphlet that he put out to the people of Arkansas right before the Civil War. And basically what he was doing is explaining what was going on with the Civil War, right? You have to remember that the level of education and people was all over the place at the time, right? There was people that couldn't read and dumb as fuck and, just ignorant and stuff like that. And then you had very astute, well-read, people, right? And so basically what Albert Pike was doing is like, hey, let's simplify this and hash this out and distribute this so people truly understand why we South feel like we have to go to war. The radical differences of opinions as to and why. What is the main thing? What was really the problem with the North and the South during the Civil War? It was specifically about the powers of the general government, and that's exactly what we find out, right? The South wanted to secede. They had according to the Constitution, as far as I understand, is what Albert Pike was saying. They had every legal ability, or they had every legal what do I want to say? They were legally blessed or whatever, according to the Constitution, that if they wanted to secede and start their own country, they absolutely had the right to do that. Not only do you just have the right to do that as like a, once again, as a free man under God or whatever, but they have the right to do that in the Constitution. This is what he's explaining in this pamphlet, of course. This is all legal mumbo jumbo that most people don't give a shit about, of course, but this is what was really going on. The radical differences of opinion as to the very nature and the course of the powers of the general government is what the problem with the North and South was, okay? While they hold that this is simply a government of popular majorities and degrade the states to the rank of parishes or counties, they have become too strong for us. Outnumber us in people and in states, receive 100,000 immigrants per annum, have open space wherein to make 6 or 7 new states, and announce it as their ultimatum that we shall not expand southwardly or southwestwardly, but slavery shall be prohibited in all territory hereafter acquired. What they were saying is basically like, you in the South, you're going to listen to us in the North. We're bringing in immigrants by the hundreds of thousands. You're not going to be able to expand South. You're not going to be able to expand West, and you will abide. You will abide by what we have to say. Okay? What the North were doing was completely disregarding the Constitution as it was written. He who reflects on all this cannot fail to see that separation was but a question of time. Sooner or later, the North and South could not help but divide, unless the powers of government were placed and kept in the hands of the wisest statesmen of each. Of course, it wasn't. If they were habitually entrusted to second-rate men, disintegration was inevitable. If the government was habitually entrusted to second-rate men, disintegration was inevitable. I wonder what's going on in America today. I wonder if a bunch of second-rate fucking absolute demons are running our government and the shit's going to shit. If the Union could have continued, this is once again from State or Province, Bond or Free, Mr. Albert, the Honorable Albert Pike, if the Union could have continued as it ought to have done and would have done, if men had been wise, we would insensibly have become more and more one nation. Our common flag would have made us so. Time and habit would have inevitably consolidated us, and the antagonisms of race would have died out or combined in harmonious action. He's saying that the South was like, hey, we cannot separate from the cotton-growing states. By the way, most of the South was not cotton-growing. Most of the South, in fact, according to numbers, somewhere between 88 to 90% of the people in the South did not own slaves. And then they said even of the roughly 10% that did, there's a huge portion that owned 20 or less. So for the most part, you had 90% of the people in the South fighting against the North, and they made it all about slavery. Meanwhile, most of the people in the South did not own slaves. So what was really the contention? The North was corrupt as fuck. And that's who won. And now we have the shit show that we have today. Can I get an amen? Amen. We cannot separate from the cotton growing states. Even if we didn't, he's saying even if we wanted to be like, let's abolish slavery, we cannot separate from them because they're part of our economy. Okay? And once again, he's saying, it's not saying that, oh, we're just pro-slavery and stuff like that. He's saying that the antagonisms of race would have died out or combined in harmonious action. It would have taken care of itself. And as we're going to see, according to the actual history, I think that we can trust anyway, that's what was going on in the South. It was taking care of itself. But the North came in and be like, no, you Negro haters. We need to absolutely destroy the South, free the black, push the black into positions of power. And what are you going to do? Cause chaos. And that's exactly what happened. And that's exactly what demon worshipers do. They come in and they find logos and they cause chaos. I love this line. Listen to this. Listen to the poetry that's dripping off Albert Pike's fucking tongue here. The sober truth is that a revolution of some kind had become as indispensable as thunderstorms are to purify the stagnant atmosphere. The body politic had become sick, almost unto death. Self had become everything and the country nothing. Corruption and the prostitution of public office and the place to private profit had become so almost universal and so little disgraceful that without a great change it was not possible for the republic to endure. Self had become everything. Me, 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 me. You don't give a shit about the country. You don't give a shit about your community. You don't give a shit about your religion. You don't give a shit about your race. The self had become everything. America essentially was being created into this place that you could just become the biggest narcissist you want and be me, me, me. I don't know. Is that what's happening today? I would say so. I would say so. That's what they were saying was going on. Fast forward to today. Self had become everything and the country nothing. Corruption and the prostitution of public office. And the place to private profit had become so almost universal. This was before the Civil War. He was saying that the government was a market house of corruption. Everybody that was in there was doing it for private profit. They didn't care about the country at all. I think Pike might have been onto something. The government had become a great market house in which everything was bought and sold. It was well said a year or two since the Senate that ours was the most corrupt government on the face of the earth. Before the Civil War, our government was the most corrupt government on the face of the earth. I think Pike might have been onto something. This is what he says here. It is especially essential that the ground of separation should not be misunderstood by any considerable portion of our own people, that a mere corollary should not be mistaken for the essential principle involved, and that a part of our people in some of our states should not imagine that there is no more vital principle or broader question at issue than the interests of slave owners and the right of emigration into uninviting and inhospitable territories. The northern states made the whole Civil War about the fact that all those Southerners want to take their cattle, their slaves, to the north in unhospitable territories, and so they're saying that this is what the war was all about. This is what the northern papers and this is what they instigated and drummed up the war about. And here Albert Pike saying, make no mistake, it ain't about that shit. It ain't about that at all. And then he goes on to say, abstract theories of governments rarely enlist the passions of the people. And this is what he's dealing with. It's abstract theories of government. Hey, states' rights over, basically the federal. It's anti-federalist, federalist, essentially. They operate chiefly on the minds of statesmen. But when these theories, applied to and developed in facts, become palpable realities, then the popular heart is moved by them, and they beget revolutions. In other words, once people figure out what these fucking demons have been doing in our government and how they've been completely corrupting it and going through the inside out and private profit and pushing race relations, once that is a palpable reality, you'll get a revolution. What do you think is going to happen in this country? That's why they're trying to stop right now, be like, anybody that has any problems with the government, you're a white supremacist or you're a magatard. I, for one, this is what he says. This is Albert Pike saying this. He's saying, I'm not saying slavery isn't a problem. As far as we know, Albert Pike did not own slaves at all. Once again, probably about 90% of the people in the South did not own slaves. Yet they were willing to go to war for that? Something ain't right. I, for one, have not deplored, this is what Albert Pike says, I, for one, have not deplored the agitation of the question of slavery, for in its discussion have been all the time involved the very essential nature and terms of the compact under which our national system exists. The question to which slavery has given rise could not have remained unsettled, nor have been ignored. He's saying in the South, this is Albert Pike saying this before the war, he's saying, we're going to have to deal with slavery. There's no getting around it. And the real issues are far graver. The real issues of the North and South are far graver than that of the right of the Southern citizens to emigrate to a territory and as slaves. That's just what the South. That's just what the North made it about. Really, it was about immigration. It was about the corruption of the government. It was about the North that was going to be completely dominating the South in politics. It was not letting the South continue on with expansion into territories. It was completely, basically, throwing out the entire foundation of the Constitution. Okay. So that's what Albert Pike has to say. He also goes on to say there is, I think that's enough. Actually, that's enough. You can watch the Fall of Albert Pike if you want to watch the rest of it. Okay, so part 2. So that's part 1. So this is before the war. Basically, we find out why the North and South were actually fighting, that sort of stuff, and basically what was going on in the South, before the war. This is now we're going to watch The Birth of a Nation, which is basically the 17-minute movie. Synopsis, okay, but it's kind of necessary to watch. Like I said, this is going to be a long one. Tough titties. So part 2, the war. We're going to look at what happened before the war, into the war, and then the birth of and we're going to watch the synopsis of The Birth of a Nation. Okay, what they say in this movie, D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, which is the thing that absolutely regenerated the KKK, right? The KKK. Basically, what they say in the film is that the bringing of the African to America. Let's start this again. The bringing of the African to America planted the first seeds of disunion. So basically, the country was a free country. They were establishing their country and stuff like that. Of course, you had people bringing in at the time slaves, black slaves from the Congo, from Middle Africa, that sort of stuff. I'll show you a map of that. Okay, and then basically what these guys are saying, this film that's promoting the KKK was saying the reason that we're even in this problem in the first place was not like us white people are just hate the Negroes, go grab the ships, go grab some Negroes from that other continent, bring it back here, and then we'll whip them because we enjoy it or some shit. No, this is the KKK basically saying slavery was the problem in forming this country, that people even bring in slaves in. Okay, now mind you, This comes from New World Jewry. This is a book by Seymour Liebman. It's Requiem for the Forgotten, 1493 to 1852, and it's basically the New World, which is of course America, that sort of stuff. Really an old world, but basically saying a Jewish historian basically saying we dominated and controlled the slave trade. This is not white supremacists saying this or Ku Klux Klan members or anything like that. This is a Jewish fella, Liebman there, basically saying, yeah, we totally controlled the slave trade. We totally dominated it. They came with ships carrying African blacks to be sold as slaves. The traffic in slaves was a royal monopoly, and the Jews were often appointed as agents for the crown in their sale. The ships were not only owned by Jews, but were manned by Jewish crews and sailed under the commandment of Jewish captains. Why do you think it was easy for a religious people that absolutely think in sacred profane, we're the chosen ones? Do you really, in their quote-unquote morality, which is immorality, iniquity, in their belief systems, in their morals, if you will, that's totally fine. It's totally fine to go and snag these people. They're just cattle. They're just chattel. They're not like the chosen people like us, okay? The Jews were the largest ship chandlers in the entire Caribbean region, where the shipping business was mainly a Jewish enterprise. The introduction of indigo, rice, corn, tobacco, and cotton more profitable. In fact, the cotton plantations in many parts of the South were wholly in the hands of the Jews, and as a consequence, slavery found its advocates among them. So, let's just pump the brakes and take a step back here, right? The evil whites in the South, according to Jewish records, according to just regular census records, right? Not only did you have free blacks living in the South, but the blacks that were there that were enslaved, according to Jewish sources, were brought there by Jews And the majority of the people that were enslaving people in the South were Jews. That's not white supremacists saying that. That's literally the slave owners saying that. That's literally Jewish historians saying that. Jews in the American slave trade. Once again, Dr. Saul S. Friedman, Jews in the American slave trade. Basically an entire book by a Jew that's being like, yeah, we totally controlled the slave trade. We were the ones that sowed the seeds of disunion in America way back in the Dizzy. They're just saying it. The slave ports were where some of the first synagogues were built. Curacao, Suriname, Argentina, Barbados, Jamaica. These were all places where some of the first synagogues were made in those other countries, and that's exactly where slave ports were. Once again, that's according to Jewish sources. Slavery, by the way, was not just a white enterprise, as we know. I mean, even the word slavery itself is Slav, which means white, okay? But this is the slave trade from Africa to the Americas, basically 1650 to 1860, right up until, the Civil War, right? So you had, the slave coast, the Congo, Angola, Sierra Leone. This was basically the West African slave trade regions, and they were brought, it even says, between 1650 and 1860, approximately 10 to 15 million enslaved people were transported from Western Africa to the Americas. Most were shipped to the West Indies, Central America, and South America. Most of these blacks were shipped to the West Indies, Central America, and South America, where there was brown-skinned people and shit like that. Meanwhile, what were we taught in history? It's all just America, and we just hated the blacks, and it was the evil, dumb Southerners. It's fucking retarded. That whole opinion and belief is just a narrative that was placed in your head, and you were bombarded with it, at least in the American schools, right? Because you have to believe this because that's actually what happened. It's bullshit. Okay? Now, mind you, who were these blacks that they were taking from Africa? First and foremost, how did they blacks get enslaved in the first place? Do you know who was enslaving those blacks in Africa? Blacks. Blacks. Blacks enslaving other blacks, selling those blacks to Jews. This was the kind of blacks that they were grabbing from the Congo, from Sierra Leone. These blacks were not educated. They had a lot of these blacks did not have, this is not putting down the African race or anything like that. This could happen to any race, and has. They were not educated. They didn't have, as far as we know, at least, and especially, we can say this for the Native Americans as well, that there was lots of Native American tribes that didn't even have a written language. A written language tells you something about your intelligence level. It does, as far as your civilization is concerned, okay? So here you have these blacks that were basically what? They were savage in every sense of the word. I'm not trying to put down African Americans or anything like that. I'm like, this is what it was. These blacks were working on plantations in Africa. Then they were sold, okay? So then they come to America, right? By Jewish captains and things like that, and they didn't know how to read or write. They didn't have the basic moral standards. They didn't live under any sort of advanced civilization. That's the blacks that were coming to America here. Now, these blacks are supposed to survive and live in a genteel white society. That's never going to happen. Of course, the people that were trying to sow the seeds of disunion in America abso-fucking-lutely knew that. That's why they brought them in the first place. And they also knew that there would be a bunch of whites that, in some cases, that were completely morally compromised or whatever, that would buy these people. No problem. But that's not all that was going on with the white slave owners and the slaves, as we'll see. That's not what was going on. It was just, they brought these savage black people that were owned by black fucking people, and then they brought aboard Jewish ships, and they came here, and then they just started beating them, and chain gangs and shit like that. That general understanding of, not even understanding, misunderstanding or misnomer of slavery is bullshit, for the most part, okay? We'll see it today. Let's talk about the Klan, okay, for a second. Actually, we'll get into slavery here, okay? I just want to show this. The Klan and the Negro. The Klan stands for law and order. Many a Negro is alive today, and we're going to find this out, because of the members of the KKK. As we'll see, the KKK held in check a mob and tried to establish law and order while an innocent black man was being threatened. In some places, the Negroes have been so favorably impressed that they have asked for a charter for a Klan made up of wholly black people. Why? Because they were basically doing exactly what the white people were doing. We want to promote our race. We want to promote our ideals. Our ideals. I want to have black schools. I want to have black colleges. I want to have black churches. And guess what? The Klan, in their own words, saying that's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay? So this is what slavery was sold as. Basically, it was just all these blacks, and they were just being whipped, and it was just this horrific, horrendous thing. And I'm not saying that didn't happen in some cases. And probably there's lots of cases in many respects where, yes, whites were absolutely brutal to the blacks and things like that. That's really, I mean, when you think about this, look at how the Amish treat their animals. They're fucking horrible to them. Okay, well, just, then just take that 100, 200 years ago or whatever it was, right? And then say, hey, look at what these people were doing. They were treating their chattel like shit. Yes, that did happen. That's not all that was happening, though. At all. Okay? Now, basically what you're going to show is that when the North wanted to invade the South, they were putting out tons of propaganda in the newspapers to basically demoralize the South and basically shit on them and be like, look at how immoral they are and how they treat all of these whites just treat their slaves awfully and shit like that. And this is the promotion that they put out to people to show it's like, look, we need to go down and absolutely subjugate the Southern people. The North are the moral, upstanding people. And meanwhile, it was the people in the government that were corrupt as fuck that didn't give a shit about anybody in the country, that was looking to absolutely, once again, destroy and decimate the country in general. And so what did they do? They put out this whole idea that, oh, this is what all of the slaves in the South were about. And of course, they used the exact same picture in tons of different articles. So there's this guy, and then they use it again, and then they use it again, and maybe he was whipped. I don't know. Or maybe a bunch of white piece of shit politicians that were working with a bunch of Hebrews actually just grabbed this guy and whipped them himself. Maybe. I don't know. I don't have that history. Slavery, there it is again. Same, just propaganda. Now, isn't it saying that there wasn't slaves that were beat? There were. But is this the totality of everything that was going on in the South as far as the slaves? As we'll see, no. Not even fucking close. But that's what you were taught, weren't you? Here's Jesse Lee Peterson basically talking about how slavery was a good thing. Okay? Just watch this.
You think slavery was a good thing?
Yes.
What? Why?
That's a good question. I think it was good in that those were the times, and it allowed us to be born in America, the greatest country on this side of heaven. We were allowed to be born here rather than sneaking across the borders or having to fill out an application and wait for years or take a test, which we would have never passed, by the way. But take a test. And so rather than, and all cultures have been enslaved in one form or fashion or another, right? And so rather than whimpering and whining and begging, especially blacks today who don't even know anything about slavery, they have freedom to do what they want. Instead of complaining, I would show my appreciation to the folks who died and sacrificed their lives that I might be born in the greatest country in the world. So even though slavery looked like it was a bad thing, it turned out to be good for us because we could be stuck in Africa somewhere.
Okay, so you see that he's basically saying like, look, you can say slavery was this totally bad thing, and no one here is promoting slavery. I'm 100% against slavery, but these were different times, okay? And he's saying that basically these Jewish captains, whatever, that grabbed these blacks, came over here, and these blacks got opportunity to what? Do exactly what they can become president, right? They had every opportunity to do what? Learn to read and write, learn to go to school, learn skills and trades and things like that, as far as like literally how to grow crops and stuff like that. So these are the blacks that were being overtaken. Obviously, they could be overtaken because they didn't have the advancement to actually defend themselves. Overtaken by these people and then brought here. And then what did a bunch of these white Southerners do? Educate them, gave them a like room and board and stuff like that, and we're going to see this, okay? Now, Marty, what are you talking about? This is just fucking crazy, right? Well, I'm just some dumb Irishman who's an immigrant himself. Forget about what this white guy has to say. Let's listen to what the slaves say themselves. So what I did is actually looked at, and this comes from the Atlantic, right? It said, why would a former slave praise slavery? Wait, what? No, obviously it was the evil white man and the black was just being put down. And what you're going to find is that a lot of these ex-slaves absolutely not only praised their slave owners and things like that, but actually said that things were better when they were slaves. Why? Now, we have to understand context. They just came from the fucking Congo. They didn't have housing, reading or writing. They didn't have a language. They didn't have even a civilization. They were overtaken themselves. They were slaves themselves, working on plantations and shit. Then they come here. They get an education. They get room and board. They get a roof over their head. They're taught all these skills and stuff like that. And then these blacks, not me, I'm not saying this. These blacks are saying that was a good thing. Slave Confessions. This is Clara Davis. White folks, you can have your automobiles, paved streets, and lights. You can have your buses and streetcars and hot pavement and tall buildings, because I ain't got no use for them anyway. I tell you what I do want. I want my old cotton bed and the moonlight shining through the willow trees. This comes from the Atlantic, by the way. In the cool grass under my feet while I run around catching lightning bugs. I want to feel the sway of the old wagon going down the road, dusty road, and listening to the wheels groaning as they roll along. I want to sink my teeth into that old ash cake. White folks, I want to see the boats passing up and down the Alabama River and hear the slaves singing at their work. I want to see dawn breaking over the black. Think about this, like slaves singing while they're working. Were they just singing because they were trying to pass the time because it was so brutal? Maybe, or maybe they were singing because they were actually enjoying what they were doing. According to, as you'll see, according to a bunch of blacks, that's what was going on. Who gives a shit what I think about it? I want to see dawn break over the black ridge and the twilight settle over the place, spreading an orange hue. I want to walk through the pass through the woods and see the rabbits and the birds and the frogs at night. But they took me away from that a long time ago. They took me away from that. Weren't long before I married and had children. But don't none of them contribute to my support now. Why? Raised by the state. She ended up having children, and what happened to them? Oh, the state took them and killed them. But they took me away from that a long time ago. Weren't long before I married and had children, but don't none of them contribute to my support now. One of them was killed in the big war with Germany, and the rest is all scattered out, 8 of them. Now I just live from hand to mouth, here one day, somewhere else the next. Wasn't happening when they were enslaved. I guess we all gonna die if in this depression don't let us alone. Maybe someday I'll get to go home. They tell me that when a person crosses over that river, the Lord gives him what he wants. I done told the Lord I don't want nothing much, only my home, white folks. I don't think that's much to ask for. I suppose he'll send me back there. I've been waiting for him to call. Let's read a bunch of these. This is the GutenbergFiles.org. You can go and check out a bunch of these. This is just like, once again, a little smorgasbord of all of these slave narratives that were basically saying, hey, slavery wasn't too bad. Once again, who gives a shit what a stupid Irishman thinks about this? Let's go to the black sources. Okay? There's a bunch of these. Slavery wasn't so bad. Colonel Rupert was a good master. But he lived way over in Mobile and was at his scuba plantation. That was in Kemper County, and his overseer was there. His overseer there sure was handy with a whoop. I was a cotton hand and spent most of my time toting water for the other hands. When Mr. Lincoln emancipated us, we were free, and I didn't carry any more water. It wasn't till after the surrender I went to Butler County, where Colonel Rupert had him another plantation. After the slaves were free, which, by the way, when you talk about whipping and things like that, do you know that like corporal punishment was just a regular fucking thing? Do you ever hear about how the nuns would literally bend like children over that were being like me, basically, you're just being a ruckus, if you will. Bend them over a chair in front of everybody and smack them on their ass? Go back in time and you actually look at what the entire culture was. You had white men and women beating white children. That was a standard thing in schools, okay? It's because if you get out of line, just like my daddy taught me, well, I can count to 3 or you're going to get an ass whooping. And I guarantee after you fucking got the ass whooping, you did what I told you, didn't you, right? It wasn't until after the surrender I went to Butler County where my old slave master was and worked on his plantation. They were free. What do? They go back to work for the guy. When the surrender come, she say that a whole regiment of soldiers rode up to the house yelling to the niggers that they was free. Then the soldiers took out the meat of the smokehouse and got all the lasses and meal and give it to all the niggers. They robbed the bees and then they eat dinner and go on to the next place, taking the men folks with them and all excepting due ones to old my pappy among them. Basically, these black soldiers came down after the slaves were emancipated. They absolutely destroyed the homes. Do you think that they were following the Constitution? Do you think that during this that they had that they had warrants to go into the homes and shit like that? No, they just came in, they burned the place. They took all the food. They gave it to all the blacks who were basically, they didn't know how to read and write and shit like that. Most of them. Good portions of them. All my children is dead but two. I had 5. One is living in Atlantic City, New Jersey, and I live with the other one. I suspect I'll just go on living here till I die, serving the old master as best as I can. They were free, and they decided to continue to live with their master. Meanwhile, while they had children, as you can see, some of those children, they didn't have any other opportunity. Those black children had nothing else to do. So what did they do? Just like they do, this is what they have, like recruitment centers and things like that in poor areas. Come fight for the patriot. Come fight for the country. Come, Negroes. Come on. Put on a soldier's outfit and go die. It's exactly what fucking happened. Do you think that's because the North really cared about the blacks? Stop. Don't insult people's intelligence. I was born on a plantation in Jackson, Mississippi that belonged to my massa, to Minta Witherspoon. My pappy and my mommy was named Lum Phyllis Witherspoon. The white folks lived in a big white house made out of otten logs. Honey Massa and Misfits Witherspoon was quality. They were quality people. Yes, man, they was quality. Us slaves was treated like we was something around that place. Massa didn't low no observer to tote no strope in his niggas. I know little Marster went down to war because I had heard the folks talking about it and wondering if old Marster gonna get killed. Was he gonna die? Was my master gonna get killed? Then I heard them say the niggas was free. But us didn't leave the old master for about a year after the surrender. Then us went to live on the young mistress's place at Barlow Bend after she married Bob Flynn. Right there I stayed till I was grown and married. Once again, that went to live on the young mistress's place. They went to live on the slave owners' plantation, the slave owners' houses. According to them. Let's keep going. Them was show good times. Cause us had all us could eat then, and plenty sugar came to make lassens out and to make the biscuits in the big trays and shit. Basically, you can read a bunch of these. Marse John was good to all his slaves, and he wouldn't stand no rush or meanness to his niggas. If and den O'Seer got mean, old master would turn him off. If and one of the overseers of the Negroes got mean, our master would turn him off. Old master Luz took good care of his slaves. Our master took good care of us, because when we got sick, he had a doctor, just like when the white folks got sick. So the slave gets sick, and what do you do? Fucking let the Negro die. Who cares? He's just a slave. We don't give a shit about them. They brought their own doctors in. According to blacks. And I ain't never been in no trouble in all my life. I ain't been in lawsuits. I ain't been a witness either. I always trust everybody as good as I can, and I use my manners as good as I knows how, and the Lord sure has good took care of me. Why, when my house burnt up, the white folks helped me so that in no time you couldn't tell I ever lost a thing. Why didn't they just fucking hang that Negro? Why did they take all their time and bring a community together and build a new house and give them things if they just hated on the Negro? Let's keep going. Most all the quality white folks belonged to Big Creek, and when the slaves got show enough religion, they have them jive at Big Creek and baptize in the swimming hole. They allowed the blacks to come and baptize in the same fucking swimming hole as them. Some of the niggers want to have their own meetings, but Lord chill, them niggers get happy and get to shouting all over the meadow when they built they were basically being savage. They're like, well, shouting, right? So the master comes along and be like, you're acting like children, calm the fuck down. Master John quickly put a stop to that. Once again, are we putting down blacks? No, you have to understand the history of where those blacks came from. They didn't have any education. They had no civilization. They couldn't read or write. Turn you out, show if you drink too much cone liquor or dance or cuss. They were drinking liquor. Our Massa John would turn you out, though, if you got a little out of hand. But you could drink the corn liquor. Let's keep going. No, ma'am, it weren't so bad with us. The white folks was good to us niggers. Us had enough to eat, like greens from the big house. Us had our rations weighted out, pack of meal, 3 pounds of meat, half-gallon of molasses made at home in wooden mills, and that was for a week. But honey, the good old days is now gone forever. The old days was rarely the good times. How I wish I could go back to the days when they were slaves. This is what she's saying. How I wish I could go back to the days when we lived at Johnson's Landing on the river. When the folks would come to catch the steamboats. I can remember the days when I was one of the house servants. There was 6 of us in the old Massa's house. Us didn't know nothing but good times then. Before the war, when we were living in our Massa's house, when we just came from the fucking Congo, not a hop, skip, and a jump ago, life was pretty fucking good. There was an understanding between the races that the blacks were an inferior race to those whites. Why? They didn't have reading. They didn't have writing. They didn't have a civilization. They didn't even have a religion. They couldn't even read religious texts or anything like that. And what did these white people provide them? You're hearing it. Okay? Now, this is the carpetbagger, just so you know. So once again, a carpetbagger is a political candidate who seeks election in an area where they have no local connections. In the U.S., a person from the northern states who went to the South after the Civil War to profit from Reconstruction. A person perceived as an unscrupulous opportunist. So basically, the South had their civilization, they had their government and things like that. The North specifically went in and tried to distort and pervert and overthrow the government, and they did it with quote-unquote carpetbaggers who came in, forced themselves into the government and voted for things and put things in office that was specifically against the Southern people. That's what was going on. This is what happened after the war and things like that. Okay. So we're going to take, like I said, this is going to be a long one, whatever. This is a 17-minute movie synopsis, okay? So it just is what it is, but it's important to watch because of everything we're talking about. And like I said, I'm going to do this once and we're not going to do it again. This is a movie called The Birth of a Nation, and it's a 17-minute movie synopsis, okay? So we're going to watch it all. And basically, this was the movie that basically started the Klan, right? This is D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation. So we're going to watch a synopsis of this, and basically what it is, as far as I can tell, is a pretty accurate representation of what the race relations were like in the South, what was going on in the North and South, why basically the whole thing, and it's actually a really amazing movie. Like, for considering that this is how old it is, like the fight scenes and stuff like that is pretty epic. Like for a piece of cinema, this is the shit. It really is amazing. So. Anyway, so this is, like I said, The Birth of a Nation by D.W. Griffith, and this is essentially what started the Ku Klux Klan, if you will, okay? So strap in, and then we'll take a break after this, and then we'll rock on, okay? The plot of The Birth of a Nation revolves around 2 families living on either side of the Mason-Dixon line who become friends when their sons board together at school. The Stonemasons, the northern family, live in Washington, D.C., and own a rural getaway in Pennsylvania. The Honorable Austin Stoneman, an abolitionist politician, presides over his family, which includes a delicate daughter named Elsie, a dandy prankster named Phil, and a younger brother named Todd. The Camerons, the southern family, preside over a modest but idyllic plantation in Piedmont, South Carolina, where slaves pick cotton in satisfaction and happily dance to entertain their masters. Margaret is the refined older sister, while Flora, the younger sister, is dreamy and innocent. Of the 3 Cameron brothers, Ben develops into the main character, defending the South's ideals at all costs. His 2 younger brothers are Wade and Duke. The film is divided roughly into halves, with subsections drawing from a historical chronology of the Civil War. After an initial prologue that blames the Civil War and Reconstruction on the introduction of Africans to America, the Stoneman boys travel south during the antebellum period to visit their old pals. Romances develop. Phil falls for Margaret and Ben falls for Elsie. Ben carries this picture of Elsie with him until he finally meets her. Later, Dr. Cameron reads from his family a newspaper article stating that the South will secede from the Union if the North carries the next elections. After the Stonemans leave, war breaks out, interrupting relations between the families. One of Griffith's historical facsimiles, or fictional documentations of actual events, which will later include General Lee's surrender and Lincoln's assassination, shows Lincoln signing for the first wave of volunteers. Epic battles follow, spanning 3 years and showing the devastation that war wreaks throughout the country, especially in the South. Exceptionally produced battle sequences focus on both personal details and the bloody scale of the depredation. First, a festive Piedmont ball celebrates the South's early victory at Bull Run, and so the three Cameron brothers head off to fight in good spirits. Griffith then spans 2.5 years with one cut, and Ben, battle-worn and still in the field, reads letters from home. A predominantly black militia ransacks the defenseless Cameron home while Ben dreams of Elsie. Tragically, the two youngest sons of each family, Todd and Duke, suffer fatal wounds at the same moment on the battlefield, dying in each other's arms. General Sherman begins his infinite march, destroying Georgia as he moves forward. Wade Cameron dies in Atlanta, and the Union succeeds in pinching off what's left of the Confederacy's meager food supply. As the drama heightens, the two oldest brothers meet in battle. Though Ben's undermanned, underfed, and ravaged platoon cannot possibly win, he heroically upholds the honor of the South. Risking his life and suffering a head wound, he maniacally sprints to the Union trench and jams a Confederate flag down the gullet of a cannon. Retreating to his own trench, he again risks his life to save a wounded Union soldier while Phil's troops cheer. Eventually taken to a Union hospital in Washington, D.C., Ben finally meets Elsie, who is volunteering there. Mrs. Cameron travels to visit Ben, and upon learning he has been condemned to death under a bogus charge of spying, personally appears to President Lincoln, who graciously pardons Ben. On April 9, 1865, Lee surrenders to Grant, and Ben leaves for home. He returns to find his home in disrepair, with little food and all the good clothing sold. Meanwhile, the elder Stoneman tries to convince Lincoln to rule mercilessly over the vanquished South, but Lincoln refuses. preferring instead diplomatic restitution. Five days later, Lincoln is assassinated at Ford's Theater, a historical event that in this movie is witnessed by Phil and Elsie Stoneman, who were at the theater that night. The Camerons deeply mourn the loss of their best friend, and Stoneman assumes power, ending the first part of the film on a decidedly bleak and somber note. Adventurers swarmed out of the north, as much the enemies of the one race as of the other, to cozen, beguile, and use the Negroes. In the villages, the Negroes were the office holders, men who knew none of the uses of authority except its insolences. The policy of the congressional leaders wrought a veritable overthrow of civilization in the South, in their determination to put the white South under the heel of the black South. Woodrow Wilson. In Griffith's version of the post-war era, all blacks who aren't faithful souls team up with carpetbaggers from the north to loot, pillage, and degrade the time-honored traditions of the Southern culture. Stoneman, a champion of black equality in the South, forces Senator Charles Sumner, a historical figure, to acknowledge the legitimacy of Stoneman's mulatto protege. Silas Lynch, who secretly lusts after Elsie and is sent down to organize the emancipated slaves. Headquartered in Piedmont, Lynch instigates former slaves to rise up against Southern whites in vengeance, teams effectively with the carpetbaggers, and essentially oversees mob rule. Stoneman, in ill health, visits, bringing Elsie with him. Ben refuses to shake Lynch's hand. The two pairs of interfamily lovebirds try to restart their romances with genteel garden walks, but memories of the war make reuniting difficult. Margaret imagines a picture of Wade laid waste on a battlefield and can no longer speak to Phil. Silas Lynch spies on Ben and Elsie, who eventually succumb to their love. In response to a horrific election day in which Lynch's black supremacists intimidate the whites on the streets and in the South Carolina legislature, Ben searches his soul and finds inspiration in white children frightening black children by pretending to be ghosts and hiding under white sheets. The Ku Klux Klan is born. Southern women secretly make hundreds of thousands of uniforms bearing a woven St. Andrew's cross, and the Night Riders start a new war against Lynch's militia. Ben's involvement in the Klan crushes Elsie, but she does not sell him out. Flora consoles Elsie and then skips off into the woods to fetch water from a spring. There, Gus, a newly promoted black officer, approaches Flora and proffers marriage. Flora slaps him and Gus begins to chase her through the forest. Ben follows behind in search of Flora, having been told of her errand. Gus reassures Flora that he intends her no harm, but Flora finds herself pinned on the edge of a cliff. Threatening to jump rather than be touched by Gus, she either accidentally falls on or intentionally jumps off the cliff. Where shortly after she dies in Ben's arms. A search commences for the fearful Gus. After a complex chase sequence, the Klan eventually catches Gus and lynches him. They dump his body at Silas Lynch's door. When Lynch discovers the body the next morning, the film's climax begins. The black militia with its white sympathizers fight against the Klan. Some of the Camerons are captured, but they are freed by faithful blacks. In flight, Dr. Cameron, Phil, and Margaret come across a tiny shack in the woods owned by Union veterans, who invite them in and make peace with the Camerons over their common hatred for renegade blacks. Elsie runs to Lynch for help, but he tries to force her to marry him, promising to make her queen of his black empire. When Austin Stoneman interrupts, Lynch confides to him that he wants to marry his daughter. Exposing his own hypocrisy, Stoneman is repulsed. The noble and well-supported Klan begins its lengthy and heroic mission to rescue Elsie and the group in the cabin, now besieged by the black militia. The Klan triumphs in both battles, saving one Union veteran the horror of bashing his own child's head to save the child from the black militia. Both couples are restored and united in marriage. White supremacists strip power from the blacks through intimidation tactics, and in a religious coda meant to symbolize the second coming of the Prince of Peace, Jesus and his angels in the city of God stand in approval over the whole scene. Okay, so I put that together, which is it basically summarizes 3 hours, 3 hours 15 minutes, something like that, into like 17 minutes or whatever. But basically, if once again, you'll probably have to go back and watch this again. But if you see what was going on there, basically what you had was the government you had the race relations that were going on in the South that were, as far as we could tell, pretty amicable, right? So much so that, once again, rewind about an hour and a half ago or whatever it was when we started this, that we were saying that blacks fought in the Civil War for the South, right? Native Americans fought in the Civil War for the South. Okay, so this whole notion that basically, the South was just this black hating fucking whatever, ignorant bunch of, it's just not true. Okay, somebody said in the comments today, said Palabra de Hoy said it's essentially Europe today. Yeah, why do you think they're doing exactly what they did during the Civil War and before the Civil War? Even bringing the slaves here in the first place was to what? Race wars. We're just going to do this real quick because we got a lot to cover yet here. So donations, if anybody would like to donate to our fine little church here, Venmo, Buy Me a Coffee, Cash App, Subscribestar. I'm not going to play a song today just because we got a lot to cover. So, but if you would like to support, once again, donations, Gnostic Academy, 7781 County Road 3440, Mountain View, Missouri 65548, or you can donate via the website, okay? There's a donate tab there and that sort of thing. Of course, we have books and music and rosaries and things like that you can buy there. So, okay, thank you all for staying with me today. All right, part 3, Reconstruction. Let's talk about this. So why did the South, by the way, why did the South have the symbol, because that flag on the right there, that's the symbol of the Confederacy, right? And they say it's like, well, that's a symbol of racism and hatred and blah, 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 right? Well, why did the Confederacy decide to use the St. Andrew's cross? You look at this guy and it's like, well, what does the cross symbolize in general? Sacrifice, pain, suffering, literally going to the grave with your convictions. Noble, honorable men will go to their grave in order to defend what they know to be good, true, and right. Just like you saw in that little synopsis there, during the battle scene, the one guy, he runs from the South and he jams the Confederate flag in the cannon and shit like that. And it was like, that's bravery. That's, I will die to fight for my people, my country, my government, my community, my race. So that's why they use that symbol. Most people see it and they don't have any idea what it even means. No, that's sacrifice. That's what it is. And that's what it takes to actually build a business, a family, a church, a community. It requires service to other people and sacrifice. This is what they sold the Reconstruction as, emancipation as, of course. Now, you saw in that little synopsis there what the South actually said was going on in the South. It was absolute chaos. And it was all promoted by the North. They paid those soldiers. They paid immigrants. They paid us dumb fucking Irishmen. I love ripping on the Irish. They paid those guys that came over from basically 1840? You had what? Potato famine. I wonder if that was caused by governments, or if that was just a natural occurrence, just like COVID, or if it was implemented in order to do what? Force a bunch of Irishmen to go over to the United States to find a better life and stuff like that, because they were literally starving. So 1840, they bring a shitload of us Irishmen over. Then the Irish come here. They don't have a fucking pot to piss in. They don't have any money. They didn't come from wealth. They didn't come from like highfalutin freaking European wealth and old money and shit like that. No, we're a bunch of fucking dirt farmers, dude. And then we come here and we don't have shit from Shinola. What does the government do? Come fight our war. We'll pay for you. Just strap on this gun, soldier. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened to my grandfather when he fought in World War II. The point is this, is that the government said, during emancipation, we're going to free the slaves, and this is what it's going to look like. It's harmony and peace and all that. It's bullshit. The government knew that this is what Uncle Sam thought Reconstruction was going to be like after the Civil War. All the blacks and the whites and natives are all going to come together and stuff like that and blah, 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 blah. They had no intention of that. No, they were causing race wars. They were causing disruption. They were destroying basically what was going to be its own country, the South. And by the way, once again, literally the guy, Albert Pike under the KKK, said in his own words that the race relations would have figured this shit out. After the war, basically you had the entire Congress, which was overrun by a bunch of fucking scumbags. Wow, it's almost like today. Bunch of scumbags. And they were basically saying, we're going to go in and we're going to fucking destroy the South. We're going to go in with our armies. We're going to get a bunch of blacks that we're paying. We're going to get a bunch of immigrants that we're paying. Many of these people were not very well educated people. We're going to pay them and to go down and absolutely decimate and destroy, level the South. That's exactly what happened. Now, accordingly, Andrew Johnson at the time, who was president, was basically like, I don't want to do that. Like, no, this is against the Constitution, shit like that. But he was overridden by a Congress. President Johnson's official veto has arrived in Congress, which blocks the passage of the Steemans-Sherman Schellenberger bill. And this bill would have allowed for generals of the military to take control of the South and create a military despotism. They passed this bill, by the way. Andrew Johnson vetoed it. They passed it. They said we're bringing all those immigrants, those blacks, the Irish, everybody that we can get. We're gonna put them in uniform. We're gonna send down to the South, and we're gonna fucking cause anarchy. And the only thing that stopped that anarchy was the KKK. Johnson wants to enforce what he believes is what the founding fathers of our country would want. Well, no, this is not what our founding fathers of the country would want. Congress, I'm going to veto this bill. Congress said, fuck you. This entails preserving the justice and humanity that our Constitution grants us. The news of the president's disapproval of the bill causes a stir among the population of the United States in the North or whatever, right? Creating belief that the government is poorly run. No, we need to go in and absolutely destroy the South, those evil, frickin' dumb Southerners. This is what Andrew Johnson had to say about this bill that was being passed. And he said, in the passage of this bill, this is specifically to attack white people. This is according to Andrew Johnson. In all of our history and all our experience as people living under the federal and state law, no such system as contemplated by the details of this bill has ever before been proposed or adopted. They establish for the security of the colored race. This bill establishes for the security of the colored race safeguards which go indefinitely beyond any that the general government has ever provided for the white race. They were playing favoritism. That's what they were doing. They're like, oh, we'll give them a bunch of powers. We'll grant them authority and stuff like that. And through the power of the federal government, we'll arm these blacks and go down and we're going to protect them while they absolutely decimate the white race. Which, by the way, once again, when you look pre-war, the blacks and the whites, for the most part, in general, were getting along. Not only that, blacks that were once slaves before the Civil War were free, so much so that there was hundreds of thousands of them. More blacks living in the South, according to the census records. This bill establishes for the security of the colored race safeguards that the general government has ever provided for the white race. In fact, the distinction of race and color is by the bill made to operate in favor of the colored against the white race. They interfere with the municipal legislation of the states. That's exactly what happened with relations existing exclusively between a state and its citizens or between the inhabitants of the same state. An absorption and assumption of power by the general government which, if acquiesced in, must sap and destroy our federative system of limited power and break down the barriers which preserve the rights of the states. He was saying this after the Civil War. He's like, if we do this, this is just further erosion of states' rights over the federal government, which is absolutely dictated in our Constitution. They weren't following it 150 years ago, or whatever it is, whatever it is. On April 6th, 1866, right after the Civil War, while everything was, the South was in complete decimation, 33-15 override Johnson's veto. No, we're going into the South and we're going to fucking destroy. The 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, ratified in 1868, granted citizenship to all people, right? So basically, after the Emancipation Proclamation, the government went down and forced and said, all you blacks are free. You're all free. We'll destroy. If they're not going to allow you to be free, we'll fucking burn them. They did it anyway. Then what happens? A bunch of those blacks stayed. According to them, you're free. You're no longer enslaved. You would assume that they would just fucking run to the North and start businesses or start their communities. No, they stayed. Why? Because even those uneducated blacks back in the day, or the educated ones that were free men, absolutely knew that the government was corrupt. It's not even, In the later sections, the 14th Amendment authorized the federal government to punish the states and violated or abridged their citizens' right to vote by proportionally reducing the state's representation to Congress, etc., and mandated that anyone who engaged in insurrection, there wasn't an insurrection. They weren't trying to this is what they're saying. They are claiming that the South was trying to overthrow the United States government. It's bullshit. No, they're saying we want to leave. We want to go do our own thing. They even created their own constitution. So the idea that the South was in insurrection of the North is total bullshit. It's 100% bullshit. They were like, fucking leave us alone. They didn't invade the North. The North invaded the South. And this is a big one. During this Reconstruction policy, and it's happening again, that's right, Mr. E, it also upheld the national debt, but exempted federal and state governments from paying any debts incurred by the former Confederate states. So meanwhile, while the Confederate states had debts that they were to be paid in order to boost their economy and keep their economy going, this Reconstruction policy said, you don't even have to pay your debts to them, which left them what? Absolutely, once again, financially decimated. And that's exactly what they wanted to do. But it was for freeing the blacks, because that's what those white, aristocratic, fucking capitalist Northerners really gave a shit about. Stop. These people are psychopaths. And they used blacks, as you saw in that film, they used blacks as the military to go and destroy blacks in the South. Facts. This is what the film says. Starting the ferment, the Black Party celebrated inducing the Negroes to quit work. They came down and they're like, hey, all you Negroes are free. Then what happened? Well, just like when immigrants come into other countries from, third world nations or wherever it is, and they come to Europe or whatever, they don't know how to act. So what do? They destroy. That's exactly what's going on in the countries right now. We're reliving a civil war right now. Then they had the Freedmen's Bureau. So basically the North took a bunch of fucking tax money, gave the blacks, they set up these Freedmen Bureaus in the South, literally giving blacks everything, food, money, all this other shit, right? Why? Well, because they really cared about the Negro. No, they wanted to overthrow the South. So the best way that they could do that was arm these, basically free these black people, and now they're running amok in the society. And they don't know how to act in a genteel or, first world nation. What role did William Brownlow play during the Reconstruction as Tennessee's radical Republican governor? The Republicans of the North who wanted to just destroy and didn't really give a fuck about the blacks at all and stuff like that. But nowadays, you see the KKK, they were just a bunch of evil Democrats. Fucking retarded. As Tennessee's radical Republican governor during Reconstruction, Brownlow ruled with a dictatorial hand, disenfranchising a majority of citizens who had supported the Confederacy. So he came in and he helped the whole thing. He's like, if you show any sign of saying, the fucking government was corrupt, though we're just going to fucking level your place, we'll burn you down, we'll do whatever, we'll take away your finances. Okay? Now, mind you, during the Civil War and Reconstitution and right after it, what also was happening by these jackasses and absolute demon worshippers in our government? They were burning the old world. They were burning the fucking old world down to the ground. During 1861 to 1865, was it really just about a war because we really wanted to protect the blacks? No, they wanted to not only subjugate the South, take them completely under control, paint them as a bunch of fucking dumbass Southerners who hate the blacks, and then not only that, we're going to absolutely destroy the old world. During the American Civil War, there was great major fires: Charleston, South Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, Columbia, South Carolina, Richmond, Virginia. Right after the Civil War, you had the Great Portland Fire in Maine, 1866. Right, and then just not even a hop, skip, and a jump, maybe 5 years later, once again, this is during the Reconstruction period where people are trying to rebuild. What else did they do? They burnt Chicago down, they burnt Peshtigo down, they burnt Michigan down, they burnt the fucking, Boston down. So while this was all going on, as far as we can tell, part of the Civil War was absolutely for these, let's just call it what they are, Satan worshipers, to literally destroy the old world. And that's what was going on. And we can see that happening now today. Okay? So you want to talk about conspiracy. Why do they want to sum up the Civil War as just like, it's just the evil Southerners against the fucking righteous North? That's essentially what we were taught, right? And why do they want to teach that? Number one, they just want to lie to you. But what does it also do? It continues the narrative of that it's the North, the stupid South, and the beautiful North, and then the whites, they're just evil, fucking racist people that hate the blacks. What is this? It's divide and conquer. And they're just going to keep fucking just rolling it out. Just rolling it out. Originally, the Ku Klux Klan was founded in Pulaski, Tennessee in May 1866. It was born out of the attempt of the defeated Southern plantation owners to retrieve some of the losses which they had incurred as a ruling class as a result of the victory of the Northern capitalists. Immediately after the end of the Civil War, groups of carpetbaggers, Northern politicians, mostly from the Republican Party, which was the party of the Northern capital, took hold of the political machinery of the South. They weren't representing the people of the South. They were and what we're going to see is that they were pushing in black representatives and stuff like that. Uneducated people. The newly liberated Negroes gave them the opportunity for the Northern capitalists to come down and take hold of the political machinery of the South and destroy. That's exactly what happened. And who was there to stop this? The KKK. The record shows that it was only the disturbers of the peace, the land pirates, the people that were freed, that were going on to robbing, thieving, pilfering, destroying, that sort of stuff. Not only did you have that, but you also had the people, of course, the military regiments and, whoever it was, blacks, whites, whatever, coming down and destroying the South as well. And the Ku Klux Klan was born out of this saying, you're not going to fucking destroy our world anymore. And we're going to tell you the true history of the South. The land pirates were the ones that were coming in, who follow close upon the heels of such disorganization of society as ensues after a long war, who had any cause to fear the terrible bugbear of the Ku Klux Klanmen. In other words, the only people that had to fear the KKK and the Invisible Empire and shit like that were people that were completely causing chaos. And guess what? The South was completely destroyed and decimated and stuff like that. They brought the northern politicians, northern police force, military and stuff like that, right? And that they weren't actually protecting the South at all. So what had to happen? The Ku Klux Klan had to rise up from this. Hence why they're the Invisible Empire, and hence why they wear the ghost sheets, because they were literally telling them, they're like, we're keeping our fucking order in the South. That's what we're doing. And we're going to band together to do this. Meanwhile, while all the narratives and all the propaganda and all this other bullshit was being thrown out at the North by the newspapers, and it's still done today, this is what was actually going on. The Ku Klux Klan, as I said, were the saviors of the South. The Klan was organized, as before stated, in a sentiment of peace and goodwill to all, and malice towards none. It was established by the very best men in the country. Albert Pike. Once again, before we even talked about this, I would praise Albert Pike. Why? Because the guy was a badass. He was one of the best men in the country. The leaders of the Confederate armies and extended from the Potomac to the Rio Grande, it was composed of men who loved peace for its own sake. It was a perfect knight errantry of the southern states, as harmless and intended to be far more useful and subservient of good morals than the Loyal League and the Grand Army, which we'll talk about, which was basically a secret society, as far as I know, is still active in the North, that was filled with stupid Irishmen and blacks and stuff like that were basically like, yeah, we're going to do what the government says. And this was a response to that. Now, what was going on in the Reconstruction? This is according to, once again, this is a Northern journalist who went to the South and said, holy shit, what's happening right now is a complete takeover of your basic operative government that's actually running, right? So this following illustrates why the first KKK had to be formed. It was formed for the very survival and existence of whites. James S. Pike, a Northern journalist who had once been a fervent abolitionist, wrote an unforgettable account of the Southern Carolina under black rule. Pike was sickened by the sight of the black delegates. Why? Because they were black? No, because listen to what they were doing. What were these blacks? They were uneducated. They had no idea about how to read advanced literature or classic works of literature, or understand the ins and outs and nuances of government literature. I mean, do you think that they understood legalese or anything? No, of course not. Right? But yet they were put in positions of power. This is what a Northern guy said. At some of the desks, he commented, sit colored men whose types it would be hard to find outside of the Congo. You mean just literally where they came from? The distinguished legislators lounged or slept in their chairs, often surrounded by a litter of peanut shells and an empty whiskey bottle or two. The more conscientious members ensconced themselves behind open newspapers, often held upside down. Few of the black Solons could read or write. It's exactly what I'm saying. And now what? The North said, you're going to be in positions of power over these whites. Important business was often transacted at Fine's Saloon across from the Capitol Headquarters Saloon, which was housed a brothel, a whorehouse. And it also became known as Republican headquarters. At what business they transacted there, exorbitant budgets were drawn up for legislative supplies, which include hams, oysters, whiskey, fine rugs, corsets, imported cigars, perfumes, diamond earrings, washtubs, champagne, and anything else that struck up the legislators and their lady friends' fancies. In other words, put it on the taxpayers' dime, let's fucking go to town. And meanwhile, this was all done by people that allegedly couldn't even read. During one session, the legislators ran up a bill for $125,000 at the State House restaurant. This was in the 1800s. The State House itself was refurbished with an expenditure of $200,000 for furniture worth $18,000, with the balance disappearing into the pockets of favorites and proffers of the fat bribes. When the legislators turned their minds to a serious business of statecraft, the results were no less edifying. The state debt quickly soared from $7 million to $29 million. I wonder why the whites in the South were upset. I wonder why they had to get together wearing fucking robes and form an invisible empire. The state debt quickly soared from $7 million to $29 million in the 1800s. Big railway bonds were floated with scarcely anything to show in terms of repair and new construction. In other words, it was, just as Albert Pike said, it was a market house of corruption, and now that market house of corruption had ended up in the South. We likes to put on the taxes. A black congressman cackled, land in the South Carolina's cheap. We likes to put on the taxes so as to make it cheap. The situation in the other reconstructed states was scarcely less appealing. North Carolina's legislature had its own brothel, right in the State House. The members looted an educational fund to set up the benefit of needy children. During one of the memorable sessions, Franklin J. Moses, a scallywag who was the Speaker of the House, was voted $1,000 in gratuity to make up losses he had suffered at the racetrack. Despite his service in the Confederate Army, he became completely corrupt, joining the Egalitarian Loyal League and building a large black following. This is what the film said about the blacks in the government. There was a riot in the Masters Hall. The Negro Party in control in the State House of Representatives, 101 blacks against 23 whites. Okay, now look at what the actual, once again, from census records, what was going on in the South. Predominantly white. Northern capitalists come in, decimate the South, and then they put all of these Negroes in power over the whites in the South, which I can guarantee they weren't blacks from the South. They were almost blacks from the North, I can almost guarantee. That did what? Destroy. Going to make every law to help them out, and that's exactly what the president said would happen. That's literally what Andrew Johnson said. So this is what they showed you as, like, these were the noble black men that entered into Congress and things like that, and they were basically wearing, put them on monkey suits. That's not what this guy was saying was going on. He was saying it was chaos. Drinking corn liquor, fucking drinking whiskey and peanuts on the ground. There was one of these things, I don't think I have it here. It said that there was like literally chicken bones all over the floor. Once again, and in the film they talk about that blacks, northern blacks, were coming down in league with the Union and the carpetbaggers, and they were terrorizing blacks. And once again, this is just in the film. No, there's a history of this, a long history of it. We even know for a fact, according to census records, that there was more blacks in the South than in the North. Then you had these blacks that all of a sudden were given military power. They were given power by the government to come down and destroy. And guess what they did? They hanged some Negroes, those blacks did. Yeah, the blackface is awful. That was the 1800s, man. So... The Ku Klux Klan, what is it? By commander of the Grand Cyclops of the secret order known to the outside world as the Ku Klux Klan, I am directed in the name of truth and justice to make the following statement in reference to this organization. The columns of the Herald have been selected as the medium of the statement for the reason of its well-known metropolitan circulation. It is a well-known axiom that men prefer misrepresentation and slanderous criticism to truth and clarity. It is equally well known that there exists at a time in the United States, too, gigantic secret political organizations sustained by congressional legislation, secret political organizations made up of soldiers in the North that they paid, immigrants and things like that, to destroy the South. And then during the war and after the war, they set up a secret political organization of these people, the North did. A secret oath-bound military order in the Loyal League. It's the Grand Army of the Republic and the Loyal League, which I'll show you here, which is composed in the southern states almost exclusively of Negroes and radical emissaries from the North. It's an entire secret political organization that had oaths and they wore outfits and stuff like, just like the Ku Klux Klan, just like the Masons, just like the Knights of Columbus, just like the Knights of Pythia, just like all of them. Except this was a secret society of blacks and immigrants that were paid to destroy the South. The grand objects of these secret radical societies is to keep in subjection the Democratic Party of the North and to Africanize the South, and thereby acting in concert with congressional legislation, perpetuate the rule of radical party and change the American government from a free republic to a mongrel despotism. Let me ask you guys, while the KKK were saying this all way back in the day, and they're saying this is what's happening in this country, let me ask you, do you think we have a free republic here, or do you think we have a mongrel despotism? Grand Army of the Republic is called the GAR. It was a fraternal organization composed of veterans of the Union Army, basically blacks, immigrants, that sort of stuff, literally created by congressional Republicans that were destroying the South. I'm an Irish descendant of such an immigrant to the South. You are correct. Yes. I've done my research. So yes, Stevenson, Grand Army of the Republic. You can't even find anything about this Dr. Benjamin F. Stevenson guy. He's not, like, out of all the things on Wikipedia, that's just blank. I wonder why. So there's the Grand Army of the Republic. The Army and Navy of the United States under the control of a radical Congress have been and are about to destroy the liberties of a once free people and to uphold and sustain their mighty power and insidious and devilish purposes of the secret organizations of the Grand Army of the Republic and the Loyal League. That's correct. The Army and the Navy of the United States, which have absolutely destroyed and gone over and committed genocide in and around Israel, for Israel, right? They're obviously they don't care about the liberties of a free people. They care about what? Mongrel despotism. Let the enemies of a free government and the advocates of Negro equality and Negro domination beware. White men and white men alone are the comprehensive exponents of constitutional liberty. They are. They're the ones that created it. You can argue this all day long, and we'll get into this in a second. But at the end of the day, do you know who created this? White men. And they were making it for a white country. Okay? And by the way, once again, if we say this around the world, there's no problem. You can have Japanese and Japan has their own country. Totally cool. That's awesome. The Chinese, they can have their country and stuff like that. It's like, oh, that's totally fine. You can speak your language and have your government and stuff like that. India, you can have yours. And then somebody will come along and say, well, the white man took it from the native. By the way, do you think that that's never happened in any of those other countries? Come on, learn some history, people. Every country that has been founded overtook some other people. Okay? You can say whatever you want, right? Once again, I'm not even here defending the KKK. What I am trying to do, though, is actually, show a real history of what's going on. So, yes, in every other country in the world, there was, not every other, but pretty much every other country of the world, you had race problems, you had slavery, you had a group of people ultimately overtaking that country. Do you think the Germans were always just German? That God just put the Germans there and that was fucking it. What about Tartaria? But all of this blame on the evil white man. Meanwhile, this KKK were like saying, we just want a fucking white country. Just like I prefer to be around white people. There's no problem with that. You can prefer to be around people of your own stock and your own, that sort of thing. Because you have more in common with them. And that's how a nation is formed. All the people in the South were saying, you're not upholding the Constitution. That's it. They must and will exclusively rule and govern the American Republic. What then of the Ku Klux Klan? Is it a myth, a stern reality? We answer that it is a great and unconquerable organization. It is not confined exclusively to any state or territory of the American Union, but has strength and form wherever the flag of the American Republic is recognized as the emblem of constitutional liberty. In some localities, the organization is much more powerful than in others. It is stronger in Kentucky, in Tennessee, etc., Missouri, big Missouri, right? There is not a department of the federal government of the Army and Navy that has not a potent membership. Confederate and federal soldiers, Confederate and federal sailors alike, in the objects of the purposes of the organization, there is not a leading daily newspaper throughout the entire country that is not their Ku Klux Klan. So basically it's saying is like, hey, it's not just North and South, and there's evil Southerners that just hate the Negroes. There were people all over North and South that were identifying as Ku Klux Klan members, or were Klan members, were being like, look, our government's being taken over by international interests, and they're not concerned about the principles of the Constitution. They're not concerned about our race. They're not concerned about our country. None of it. The organization of the Ku Klux Klan originated from a necessity, the result of radical legislation and the formation of the secret political orders. This was in response to the North forming their own secret societies, the Grand Army of the Republic and the Loyal League. Consequently, the Ku Klux Klan is the effect of radical despotism and injustice. The Ku Klux Klan was first organized in the Giles County, Tennessee, 1866, and was absolutely necessity, resulting from the tyranny, domination, and aggression of the Brownlow legislation. The Ku Klux Klan, therefore, a secret political organization, the result of necessity, the sole object of which is to thwart radicalism against Negro domination in the South, Negro equality in the North, perpetuate the federal union, and preserve the Constitution that the fathers made it. And whoever asserts to the contrary utters falsehoods. So basically what they're saying is, what is afforded to every other race and every other place and every other country, you are able to, like, I'm Indian, I'm going to promote Indian ideals and Indian schools and Indian colleges and Indian government, and that's totally fine. No one has a problem with it. You say about white people, though, you're a racist. Meanwhile, the country was founded by these people. Okay? The Ku Klux Klan have secrets unknown to the initiated. Once again, this is defending secret societies, okay? The Ku Klux Klan has secrets unknown to the initiated. It's not denied. So have the ancient orders of Freemasonry, Odd Fellowship, and other secret orders and societies. But like Freemasonry, this is actually not true. But like Freemasonry and Odd Fellowship, the objects and purposes of the Ku Klux Klan have thus been the first time officially promulgated. The Masonry and Odd Fellows do that too. You can read it. They write books about it and shit. It's not secret. That's what's so fucking hilarious about this. But the Ku Klux Klan came out and said, we're just going to openly tell you what we're all about. And by the way, all of the things that they were, as we're going to see, that they had their ideals in and that sort of thing, were absolutely safeguarded and protected by the United States government in the Constitution and state laws. Now, what happened? The North didn't follow any of those laws. They didn't give a shit. So after the KKK comes out from what? The absolute total destruction of the South, lawlessness, corruption of the government, everything like that. The people, which we have a right to do in our Constitution, said, we are the people. We the people. We are the government. If you government are not following the very dictates that you're supposed to follow, then we fucking will. And that's what the Ku Klux Klan was all about. Now, the government found out that these white people were doing this. Can tell you, it shows you that there was race, that the white people have been, attacked for literally hundreds and hundreds of years now. That the Ku Klux Klan had to be stopped. It was considered a terrorist organization. Meanwhile, as you're going to see, they were upholding the ideals of the Constitution. And the people that signed this legislation, they did not at all, clearly. Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, also known as the Enforcement Act of 1871, was the United States Congress Act that aimed to combat the Ku Klux Klan paramilitary vigilantism, which is so funny because the Ku Klux Klan was actually doing the exact same thing, except they were saying about the government. The government was doing paramilitary vigilantism, and they had to be stopped. And that's why we sprung up. KKK, by 1868, the situation becomes so sharp that the federal government and a number of state governments under the control of the Republican Party proceeded to take action against the Ku Klux Klan. We got to stop these white people from being white. Protestants, Christians. Thus, during that year, in various states, laws were passed making membership of the Ku Klux Klan a crime against the state and imposing severe penalties. It's illegal to promote white ideals. The movement to crush the Klan became so drastic that finally General Forrest, who who was the Grand Wizard of the Klan, in February 1869 issued a proclamation dissolving the organization. Then, of course, we find out that later in 1915 it was brought back up. The issue has been, as raised in the South, whether the newly liberated Negro shall be allowed to develop to a point where he become a political force by very fact of his great numbers could overwhelm the Southern capitalists. And that's exactly what they were doing. Once again, they started race wars. Even though predominantly white civilization, they took the whites out of power, brought a bunch of blacks in that were completely uneducated, gave them power over the whites, and then just basically flooded them, saying, hey, it's almost like that's what's going on right now in all these white countries. They're flooding immigrants in, and then the immigrants have babies and then overcome the white population. You mean exactly what's going on right now is exactly what they were saying that the government was doing during the Civil War. Were you taught that in your college? How much did you pay for your college? How much do you pay for this? Why? So I can look up, so I can do what a professor actually should do? What a minister should do? Do his due diligence? And then treat his congregation to such truths? Part 4, the KKK in their own words. Okay, so we got to see before the war, during the war, after the war, what was going on. Now let's see what the KKK said in their own words, because I'm guessing that you never heard this. You only heard about the one part of history was like, oh, it's all the evil Negro, or it's all the evil whites and shit like that, right? And the South are just so stupid and all of that shit, right? That's what I was taught. So this is Colonel William Joseph Simmons, the second legend to start the Ku Klux Klan. He says, the noble ride of the Ku Klux Klan of the Reconstruction period is immortalized by its achievements. No errors of omission or commission by prejudiced historians can dim the luster of its deeds or rob it of its rightful place in history as the savior of the South, and thereby the savior of the nation. For had there been no ride of the KKK, there would not be today the 48 flags, stars in that flag that floats from the dome of the Capitol in Washington. To keep alive the memory of these original Klan, Colonel Simmons started it again in 1915. It's because he just hated them Negroes, right? Nearly 20 years ago, the inspiration of the reviving of the original Ku Klux Klan and its perpetuating the noble principles upon which the organization was founded and of perpetuating its spiritual purpose, because it had a spiritual purpose, originated in the minds of Colonel William Joseph Simmons, Atlanta, Georgia. Basically, he's like, hey, we got to revive this thing because he understood what's going on. Forcing race relations, race problems in the South and stuff like that, completely drummed up, completely concocted. The organization is needed. While conditions today are not the same as they were in the original Klan was organized, says Colonel Simmons, the need for an organization just like the Ku Klux Klan is just as pressing now as it ever was, but along different lines. Its purpose is to inculcate the sacred principles and noble ideals of chivalry and the development of character, the protection of the home and the chastity of womanhood, the exemplification of a pure patriotism toward our glorious country, the preservation of American ideals, and the maintenance of white supremacy in a vital perpetual memorial to the men who served so valiantly in the ranks of the original Klan. Now, once again, when you say white supremacy, the country was supremely white. There's no question about it. You had literally predominantly white. If you actually go, even in the 1960s, it was still predominantly white. And then they were saying that there was quote unquote white Anglo-Saxon people that had the ideals of this country, and we want to promote those ideals. And as you'll see, they didn't say, well, blacks, we just need to destroy them and lynch them all. No, they're like, just as Albert Pike said, no, blacks they can have their own hall, they can have their own thing of masonry, Prince Hall. No, they have every right to the lodge, they have every right to all the organization and governmental principles under our Grand Lodge, the whole bit. The KKK were saying the same thing about blacks, okay? You have the right to do whatever you're doing, but we have the right to promote our race and our ideals and our schools and our Holy Bible, okay? Now let's watch. So this is to show how prevalent the Klan was. This is about a 2.5 minute song, something like that. And we're going to show, this is pretty much gone now, right? Because of all the propaganda, but how prevalent the KKK was, right? They had like bake-offs and had they marched on Washington and all this other stuff. So we'll watch this, okay?
The stars had ceased to twinkle, and the moon had hid its face. The world was clothed in darkness, as clansmen took their place. 'Twas then I vowed to heaven that a Klan raise my hand towards heaven and shoulder a Klansman's task. I vowed that I'd be faithful wherever I may roam, to love my God and country and honor a Klansman's home. That's why I'm a Klansman and wear a Klansman's mask, and raise my hand towards heaven and shoulder a Klansman's task. I vowed that I'd be faithful wherever I may roam, to love my God and country and honor a Klansman's home. Someday I know 'twill come true, in that world not made by man, where they all do the coo-coo-coo and sing my Ku Klux Klan, that they will then all understand and see the same as we. It takes a man American who loves his liberty. That's why I'm a Klansman and wear a Klansman's mask, and raise my hand towards heaven and shoulder a Klansman's task. I vowed that I'd be faithful wherever I may roam, to love my God and country and honor a Klansman's home. That's why I'm a Klansman and wear a Klansman's mask, and raise my hand towards heaven and shoulder a Klansman's task. I vowed that I'd be faithful wherever I may roam, to love my God and country and honor a Klansman's home.
Somebody asked, like, why do they burn crosses? Let's talk about this a second. Number one, what is a flaming cross? Is basically like the idea that the cross is, it's like, the fire is, of course, like burning in the hearts and minds of men and that sort of stuff, right? So the whole idea is the fiery cross, which is the song that we started this live stream with, is basically, is saying it's not like they're pro-Christian. They're saying that the flame of Christianity is going to maintain in this country. They were Protestants, okay? So now there's the first thing. Why did they burn crosses? It's actually a religious symbol because they're a religious organization. They are. Once again, why we're talking about this today. Number two, why do they wear the masks and the whole, garb and shit like that? Number one, once again, when you actually follow Protestantism, like all the way back to like Lutheranism and things like that, right, where they're sort of like founded and that sort of stuff, you could see that those were mystics. They were like, that's why as far as I can tell, why there was such a break at that point, because the Catholic churches be like, you must believe in this, you fucking evil sinner, blah, and they were corrupt and they were diddling kids and forcing people to pay for their salvation and all this other bullshit, right? And they were basically saying, you guys don't have a fucking clue what you're talking about. So there's a tradition of mysticism and stuff like that actually exists within Protestantism. Hence, once again, when we talked about the exalted Cyclops and the wizard's hat and stuff like this, why are they wearing a wizard's hat? Because they're mystics. Number one, now a lot of that had probably been lost by most KKK members, but once again, when you actually, rewind all the way back to who was one of the guys that's Albert fucking Pike. He was a mystic. He was an esotericist. He was of the mystery school tradition and wrote extremely prominently about it. And once again, morals and dogma. He was like, so this is where that comes from. So there's mysticism there. Why the white robe? What does white reference? Purity. And that's one of their foremost ideals, actually following law and order and all that other stuff, and purity, okay? So there's specific reasons for the symbolism of that, if you don't, and then, of course, why are they covering their faces? Well, because the original Klan, they were considered terrorists, and yet what were they doing? They were defending their country. So they're like, well, fuck it, we'll be the ghosts, we will be, just as they said, the invisible empire, the ghosts in the middle of the night, to come in, and we're going to terrorize the blacks. No, we're going to uphold our country. What makes a nation? What makes a nation? Why do you think our country right now is going to absolute dog shit and will? I don't really see any other way out of it. I would like to think otherwise. You guys could make me king and I'd fix it, but you think that's going to fucking happen? Probably not. But when you look at what makes a country? Why is our country going to shit right now? Why? Because you don't have a union and a group of people who actually think the same, act the same, have the same principles and ideals. If you have a mishmash of people that have all sorts of beliefs and, all that other stuff, that is going to eventually cause chaos and you're not going to have that unity. So what makes a nation? Nationality, your race. If you look at Germany, no one would have questioned this even 50, 100 years ago. No, Germany is a white race. It's the white nation. That part of their whiteness is one of the things that check marks, if you will, that makes a nation. Your nationality, race, color, that sort of stuff. your language, having a singular language, or one or two, mainly one predominant language. Once again, why it's like, if you have a country that speaks 10 different languages, how are the people going to communicate and actually form a government and agree on shit? They're not. Religion, that's a huge one, of course, that everybody essentially believes in a predominant religion or has the morals and standards from a predominant religion. Of course, that would be Christianity, and that's exactly what the Protestants are, right? The standards and morals obviously come from religion. Your shared history, that's what a nation is. A shared history saying, hey, we came from this, and my grandpa's paw, and that sort of thing. Okay? Tradition, upholding those traditions and collective goals. Okay, well, just so you know, when it comes to the United States of America and the Constitution and things like that, that's exactly what the KKK were doing. To a T. And they'll tell you this. The ideals of the KKK. We have been passing through the formative period of organization. Now have come to a period of constructive planning and activity. We must know what we are and the things at which we stand for, and etc. And basically, hey, we want to make sure that we have rightly contributed to the upholding of character and high-grade citizenship. So the time has come that the world must know the true character of the KKK. Okay? Well, they're just going to tell you. You ever hear about this? When you spent fucking $1,200 on your race and gender in the United States class when you went to university, do you think they ever taught you this? Did they ever teach you to just go and read what the KKK say themselves? No. The character of the organization, ideals of the Ku Klux Klan. This is a white man's organization. Once again, exalting the Caucasian race and teaching the doctrine of white supremacy. Second sentence. Number one, second sentence of the ideals of the Ku Klux Klan. They were Negro haters. No. This does not mean that we are enemies of the colored and mongrel races. Why do they say mongrel? Well, because some of these races are absolutely savage. There's no getting around it. Once again, they don't have a foundational religion. Some of them don't know how to read and write. They don't even, any of that sort of stuff. Okay? Those would be mongrel races. I would have no problem calling them mongrel races. That doesn't mean I inherently think that I'm better than them. But they go on to say, but it does mean that we are organized to establish the solidarity and to realize the mission of the white race, just like every other race has the right to realize the mission of its race. All of Christian civilization depends on the preservation and upholding of the white race. It's essentially white doctrine. Okay, not like Christianity. What I'm saying is their where they came from. Once again, their tradition. They were white. Okay. This is what the imperial wizard has to say himself. Say, hey, do we have a right to form? When all these people say, no, the Ku Klux Klan terrorist organization, you can't form. Really? Okay, well, this is what the imperial wizard has to say himself. He said to the Washington correspondent of the Chicago Tribune, the Knights of Columbus admit only good Roman Catholics to their ranks, and under the laws of the land, they have a right to prescribe regulations under which their members are admitted. That right is not questioned by the Klansmen. They're saying, the Knights of Columbus, you have every right. Just like Albert Pike said, you have every right to form the Prince Hall Masonry. The B'nai B'rith and B'rith Israel admit only men of Jewish lineage. Those fucking racists. Those actually are racist. But in this, the Jewish people are sustained by legal rights not challenged by the Klansmen. The Klansmen are saying you have the right to do that. The Jews have the right to do that. The Roman Catholics have a right to do that. Then they go on to say, the African Blood Brotherhood restricts membership of men of the colored race only, and in this restriction they are not opposed by the Klan. The Klan does not take issue with them because they are also within their legal rights. They're saying, oh, the African Blood Brotherhood, where you only accept blacks and you only allow you, totally fine. Not only do the KKK say it's totally fine, the United States government says it's totally fine. Except for the KKK, right? Except when it comes to white supremacy. Then we got to destroy that. And that's exactly what happened. We stand for white supremacy. Distinction among the races is not accidental, but designed, is what they say. And that's exactly what it says in the Bible, right? This is clearly brought out in the one book that tells authoritatively other races. This distinction is not incidental, but is the vastest important and indicates the wisdom of the divine mind. It is not temporary, but as is abiding as the ages have not yet ceased to roll. The supremacy of the white race must be maintained, or be overwhelmed by the rising tide of color. Are they saying, no, you can't have your religions and your society? No, they're saying we want to maintain ours. In this sense, there's nothing wrong with white supremacy. They want to be supremely white. We must keep this a white man's country. Keep, meaning It was predominantly, no question about it. It says here, only by doing this, by keeping it a white man's country, can we be faithful to the foundations laid by our forefathers. This is what they're saying is 100% true. This republic was established by white men. Facts. It was established for white men. Facts. Our forefathers never intended that it should fall into the hands of an inferior race. Facts. Every effort to wrest from white men the management of its affairs in order to transfer it to the control of blacks or any other color, or to permit them to share in its control, is an invasion of our sacred constitutional prerogatives and a violation of divinely established laws. Once again, all they wanted was all we're saying is we want our own country and we don't want a bunch of race mixing going on. Now, fast forward to today and go to Canada, go to Australia, go to Europe, go to America. What do you find? They're warning you exactly what's going on right now. Now you wonder, why were we taught to hate the KKK? Because they were lynching the blacks and hating them. As we'll find out, as they already said, no, the KKKs that were going around lynching blacks, fucking government operatives. Dressing up in white robes, terrorizing people, blaming it on the Ku Klux Klan so they could call them a terrorist organization and destroy white supremacy, which was already happening in this country. No person of the white race can submit to such efforts without shame. One of the sad facts of American political life is the readiness of so many politicians to sell their noble white birthright for a mess of black pottage. They would betray their race in order to win a few black votes, and that's true. This is a Gentile organization, no Jews allowed. And as they go on to say, we sing no hymns of hate against the Jew, just like we don't. We don't hate anybody. We're going to call you out for your bullshit. We don't want anything to do with you. You should be held for the injustices that you've committed upon this earth. Fuck yes. Nothing. Gentile organization. Is there anything wrong with that? It is an American organization. And we do restrict membership to native-born American citizens. The records show, and once again, all of this is protected under the Constitution. The records show that recently, at least, the aliens who have been flooding our land have come into this country not because of any love for America, but because of intolerable or unfavorable conditions in the land they left behind. They're saying exactly what Pike said way back in the day, exactly what the newspapers were saying, that these people are coming to the country, not that they may contribute in any way to its growth and development, but they may find opportunity to advance themselves. Narcissists, people that don't give a shit about the community, their collective, their race, their religion, their country, the constitutional, prerogatives of the country. They're coming in and be like, me. I'm going to use this country to better myself, and I don't give a fuck about who founded it or anything like that. That's exactly what's going on. They're calling it. Like it, don't like it, whatever. And if you deny that, I feel sorry for your discernment or your ability to see what's going on. The KKK is a Protestant organization. They did not like the Catholics. Why? Because the Catholic Church is a bunch of fucking scumbags, and obviously, right? They're corrupt as the day is fucking long, working absolutely in concert with the Zionists. It is a Protestant organization. Membership is restricted to those who accept the tenets of true Christianity, which is essentially Protestant. We can say this to the world without apology and say truly that our forefathers founded this as a Protestant country. That is our purpose, to reestablish and maintain it as such. Ideals of the Ku Klux Klan. We would not rob the colored population of their rights, but we demand that they respect the rights of the white race in whose country they are permitted to reside. Once again, oh God, what a bunch of racists. No, that's literally what was going on. It was predominantly white, and they were allowed to reside here. In fact, even the slaves that were brought over, once again, when you actually look at what was going on with the South, a lot of those southern slave owners were absolutely wonderful to their slaves. They understood the predicament that those black people were in, and because of their Protestant, Christian, I need to help out the lesser man, they took those ideals and actually helped those blacks. Like it, you weren't taught that, of course. When it comes to the point that they will not recognize and respect those rights, they must be reminded that this is a white man's country. Purity of the white blood must be maintained. Well, I wonder what's going on now. You have absolutely the destruction of the white race through what? Intermarrying blacks, whites, reds, up, down, left, right. This has been going on a long time. This is engineered. Who's engineering it? Purity of the white blood must be maintained. No problem in any other race. Say white, though. One of the crying evils of the time is the mixture of the white blood with that of the Negro. This evil has gone on since the colonial days until perhaps more than half of the Negroes in the United States have some degree of white blood flowing in their veins. So all you anyway, the condition is not only biologically disastrous, but it's giving rise to grave social problems. Were they right or were they wrong? Christian ideals. We magnify the Bible as the basis of our Constitution, the foundation of our government, the source of our laws, the sheet anchor of our liberties, the most practical guide of right living, and the source of all true wisdom. We teach the worship of God. We honor the Christ as the clansman's. We honor the Christ as the clansman's only criterion of character. You know how we're supposed to model ourselves up to Christ and things like that? They were saying that. And we seek at his hands that the cleansing from sin and impurity which only he can give. We believe that the highest expression of life is in service and in sacrifice for that which is right. Amen. Absolutely agree with the KKK. That selfishness can have no place in a true Klansman's life and character, but that he must be moved by unselfish motives such as characterized our Lord Jesus, our Lord the Christ, and moved him to the highest service and the supreme sacrifice of which he was right. Patriotic ideals, citizenship ideals, development of the highest standards of citizenship. We take our stand upon the Declaration of Independence, the document that denies the dogma of despots, that kings rule by divine right. It asserts that governments derive their power from the just consent of the governed. Do you think that the South was consenting to the North governing them? No. No. Do you believe in the Christian religion? We do. Do you believe the government of the people, by the people, for the people? We do. Do you believe in just laws and enforcement of those laws? We do. Do you believe in free speech? We do. Do you believe in freedom of assemblage? We do. Do you know that the press is censored and controlled by un-American interests? We do. Do you believe in freedom of the press? We do. Do you believe it is a crime meriting severe punishment for mass men to go abroad, either in daylight or darkness, whipping, burning, and killing? We do. You know why? Because they weren't doing it. It was the government acting as the Ku Klux Klan just so that they could paint history and believe exactly what most people believe today. Do you believe in the sacredness of the home? We do. Do you believe in moral cleanliness? We do. Do you believe in the upholding the virtue and suppression of vice by constituted authority? We do. Oh, protecting our women and children? How dare you, KKK? Klansmen do not break laws. They uphold them. And that's exactly what they were doing in the South. They were actually upholding the original tenets of the Constitution, while the people in the North were just saying, fuck it. Enemies of the Ku Klux Klan claim that it is anti-Catholic, anti-Chinese, anti-Jap, anti-Jew, anti-Negro, and anti-a lot of things. These charges are fake. Klansmen are pro-American, pro-Gentile, pro-white, and Protestant. Protestant, if you will, right? Is there anything wrong with that? No. The Knights of the Ku Klux Klan is an organization of native-born American white Gentile Protestant citizens formed to oppose by all legal means every lawless element in our country, of which there was plenty of it going on before the Civil War, during the Civil War, and obviously after the Civil War, all the way up to now today, right? Do you think this thing fucking means anything to literally anybody that's in Congress or the House of Representatives? No, it's fucking toilet paper. That's what it is. Klansmen claim the right as American Protestant citizens to band themselves together to perpetuate the ideals handed down to them by the American Protestant forefathers who drafted the Constitution of our country. Investigate and find out for yourself the type of individuals and characters of the organizations opposing the Ku Klux Klan. You're going to find out that it's a bunch of Zionists and international interests and things like that are destroying this country. This is what they were saying. Klansmen have no quarrel with any creed, as long as it remains a creed and keeps out of politics. Do you believe that any person or organization with such ideals can be a bad or dangerous person or organization, the existence of which is a menace to civilization, or stated repeatedly by our enemies? You're only listening to what the enemies have to say. Certainly you do not. You could not. No one could. These sacred constitutional rights are the fundamentals upon which the order of the KKK is founded. We hold our country's welfare dearer than any allegiance to any foreign pope or alien ruler. You will find every bootlegger, blind pigger, dive and resort keeper, every dope seller, every crook and criminal in the United States individually and collectively opposed to the Ku Klux Klan. And lined up with the opponents of the Ku Klux Klan will be found in every anarchist, every IWW, every red radical, every enemy of the public school, every servant of a foreign pope, and every alien enemy of our country. They're going to come together and be like those evil white Protestants. With this horde of undesirables, you will find a few honest, sincere, well-meaning, but misguided individuals who have been deceived by the false propaganda spread broadcast through a subsidized daily press by the enemies of the Klan. The people that had the ear of literally, the populace that was running the newspapers and all that other stuff, they were all against the Klan, and what were they? Who runs the newspapers now? Remember, Klansmen are not Reds, radicals, arsons, fiends, thugs, and murderers. They are loyal American citizens, your own neighbors, the friends you meet, and are glad to greet every day. Klansmen eat at your table, regularly transact business with you, and attend church with you. where you listen to sermons preached by Klansmen from Protestant pulpits all over the land proclaiming the gospel of Christ to his every example. Klansmen are honored men in the communities in which they reside. The message is delivered to your door because the local papers will not publish anything we write, not even paid advertising. They had to go fucking door to door. Now, the KKK were basically saying that the old Vatican over there, those Roman Catholics, they're corrupt as fuck. Now, we know, I mean, we can pretty much say this, I don't need to bring any, proofs to the table here. I think we can kind of see it. You could even see it during COVID, of course, that Roman Catholic Church, there, put the mask on, you got to get your jab. We're not even going to let you in our church unless you get the jibbities. Right? They were working in conjunction with all those newspapers that were telling you got to stay 6 feet apart, and you got to do this, and you got to put the thing on, and you got to do this, and lockdown, and all this other shit. So we know that this Catholic Church is corrupt all day fucking long, moving pedophiles around, all the issues of the Catholic Church. No offense to Catholics. There's a lot of great Catholics, but the Catholic Church is a shithole, okay? The Protestants were coming along being like, yeah, that shit's corrupt. Bunch of kitty diddlers, bunch of basically people that are trying to destroy and run the world and things like that. And by the way, the Catholics, the Vatican, absolutely know the mysticism of the Bible, and they're teaching the exact opposite. And then being like, we hate the Freemasons. Well, I wonder why the Catholics hate the Freemasons. Huh. Basically what they want is the separation of church and state, these KKK did, and the Roman Catholics fight this because no sincere and devout Roman Catholic does or is permitted to believe in the separation of church and state. It has to be the church is the total state and is running everything, and then of course you see the problems with that, right? If the church is running everything, then the church is going to come along and be like, at some point, like, you can no longer practice astrology, so I can't read the Bible? Fuck. So, the Roman Catholic Church is first, last, and forever opposed to separation of church and state and in favor of the absolute control and domination of the state by the Roman Catholic Church. This organization is opposing the most cunning, deceitful, and persistent enemy that Americanism and Protestant Christianity has ever had, the Jesuits. I don't think they knew about the Jews at the time, let's just say that. But they were saying that these Jesuits, working in conjunction with the Jews, were destroying things. Speaking of invisible empires, of forces that creep through the night to do their dirty work under the cover influences that are going to set the secret places of darkness, the Jesuits are the finished product. They have burned, killed, defamed, blackmailed, and ruined their enemies by the hundreds. History reeks with it. Now listen to this. We're going to read this whole thing. This was a thing. It was a notice put out into the newspapers by the KKK back in the day, right? And we're going to read this whole thing. It's a resolution. It's literally written in the legal terminology and things like that to let you know that this is an affidavit. That the Ku Klux Klan were coming together to state this as an affidavit, right? Now read this. Resolutions. Whereas it has come to the attention of this, the New Ulm Provisional Ku Klux Klan, the realm of Minnesota, the certain sectarian organizations are disseminating a species of sectarian propaganda which unfairly and unjustly seeks to convert public opinion towards establishing a figure in the world history known and named as Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America. In other words, what they were saying is that let's break this down. There was a worldwide conspiracy. This is what the KKK were saying. To put out a guy named Christopher Columbus, very Christian name, isn't it? Columbia, we just talked about that, and Christ, interesting. They put this figure out into the world as a guy that allegedly discovered America. And the KKK were saying that history is bullshit. They put this out as an affidavit in newspapers. Whereas the Roman Catholic hierarchy claims the sole right and divine jurisdiction over the Western Hemisphere because of this alleged discovery. So in other words, in a encyclical letter of Pope Lee the 8th there, or 13th is that? Given at St. Peter's, Rome on the 25th day of December, 1891, the 15th year of the pontificate, where it is stated, the American Republic under Protestant rulers is with the worst enemies of the Church. This republic having seized upon the lands discovered by Christopher Columbus, a Catholic, and usurped the authority and jurisdiction of the supreme head of the Church. They were claiming that the Protestants were there to overthrow the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church was saying that because of Christopher Columbus, because he discovered the New World and shit like that we have jurisdiction over it. The Pope said this. Whereas all historians maintain doubt as to the Columbus ever having set foot on North America. We were taught that though, weren't we? Yet they're saying all historians maintain doubt as to Columbus ever even have said, was he even real? Many claiming that he died entirely ignorant of the existence of the mainland, of the New World. That Columbus was in a sense a discoverer, possibly insofar that he reached the West Indian island, was named San Salvador in the year 1492, but that this alleged discovery was purely accidental, as he had originally set out to sail for India, where gold and riches were, the lure, etc. Right? Then it goes on to say, whereas fair and unbiased history records that Leif Erikson, white man, right? Whereas fair and unbiased history records that to Leif Erikson is due the honorary of discoverer of the American continent in the year 1000, 5 centuries previously to the alleged discovery of America by Columbus, which false history, according to the KKK, gave essentially jurisdiction over the Catholic Pope. Is it starting to make sense now? It's starting to make sense why Protestant, sprung up, why all those Protestants came to America. Whereas, and further, if any man to be honored by the American people as discoverer of America, the honor should go to Leif Erikson, and to him and him only. They made a resolution in the paper basically talking about a grand conspiracy about Christopher Columbus in 1492 Columbus sailing the ocean fucking blue and finding out the world was a ball. Be it resolved that we go on record as deploring the insidious propaganda being promoted in our schools and through the public press by exalting and extolling Christopher Columbus as the discoverer of America, the discovery of our great land, as we further resent the false claims that the Western Hemisphere is under the sole and divine jurisdiction of the papacy due to the alleged discovery of America, by a Catholic calling attention to the fact that Leif Erikson, of Nordic stock, from which the Anglo-Saxon race was developed, was the real discoverer of America. In other words, one of the ways in which they overtook this continent was just lies, propaganda, lying through history. Race relations, that sort of stuff. The KKK were coming out and being like, this is what's going on, guys. Who do you side with right now? According to that resolution, who would you side with? Would you side with the Jewish news, the Zionist newspapers that were, and all the public school system that was teaching you goddamn nonsense? Or the KKK that would be like, hey, guess what? Christopher Columbus is a lie. Then they put out, this is a warning. This is in the 50s and things like that. This is a warning. Gamblers, bootleggers, hijackers, gunmen, loafers, lawbreakers of every class and description, black and white alike, we are here more than 1,000 strong. I think this is in Tennessee, I want to say. It's basically a warning that they put on the papers. We are sworn to preserve the sanctity of homes, the virtue of wives, mothers, and daughters. Just look at these demons. We are 100% American, ready to make any sacrifice for our beloved country. We stand squarely back. We stand squarely on the back of law and order, and we demand strict, impartial law enforcement. No law-abiding citizen need fear of our coming, but at our approach, he who defies law and common decency would do well to change his course. They were warning people, just like you would in any civilization, actual civilization, that if you had a bunch of bootleggers and gamblers and gunmen coming in and causing havoc, you were going to say, well, if the government's not going to do it, if the police are not going to stop it, then we fucking will. That's nobility is what it is. It's honor is what it is. It's protecting your country is what it is. It's protecting your race. It's protecting your religion. It's protecting your people. That's honorable. Lawbreakers, you cannot escape us. We know who you are, what you are, and where you are. The unseen eye is upon you always, day and night. This is what, once again, why did they have to go secret? Why did they have to be an invisible empire? Because they were already considered a terrorist group. And what were they doing? Upholding the ideals of the country. We mean business. Change your ways this hour, lest ye be stricken as with a lightning bolt from a clear sky. The good will welcome us. The evil will meet a swift, stern retribution. We have given fair warning. Beware. There's no organization in the United States that is more intensely American than is the Ku Klux Klan. It is composed solely of Americans. Its history, its customs, and its traditions are to be found in the annals of a country of no country save America. And as you read, those are all American ideals. Those were things that used to be taught in school systems and shit. Its present purpose and its future mission are alike indissolubly connected with American purposes and principles. The Knights of the KKK can be defined as an organization of native-born, white Protestant Americans banded together for the purpose of preserving, protecting, and promulgating the principles of genuine Americanism. Bootleggers, marauders, traffickers in vice, and other like gentry do not thrive where the Klan exists. They're keeping law and order. Not because, as its enemies assert, they are run out of town by a committee of robed and helmeted individuals armed with tar pots and bags of feathers, lies, but rather because the American element of the community, organized and efficient, determines the law-breaking shall cease. The very thing that makes a man a Klansman, his oath, prevents him from remaining a Klansman if he violates the law or takes the law into his own hands. This is their tenets. They write about it. They have pamphlets on it. They have all of that there. Then you go to the newspapers and they say, they're just robed and they're going out and they're tar and feather and Negroes and hanging them and shit like that. You know who was actually doing that? The United States fucking government. The Klan is absolutely American as chewing gum. Crooked district attorneys and Chautauquas. Chautauquas was like basically back in the day they had like this like sort of like a school or whatever that would go to like town to town and basically teach, and there would be dances and stuff like that. So it was a thing, and it happened in, I think, 50 years or something like that. If the American people knew the truth about the Ku Klux Klan, the opposition and apathy toward it would cease immediately. In defense of the Ku Klux Klan, the Ku Klux Klan has been charged with all sorts of crimes and misdemeanors, but not one charge has been proved. In last week's issue of the Digest, for instance, Louisiana members of the Ku Klux Klan, or the Klan, were charged by Louisiana editors, newspaper, with the murder of 2 young men. Well, as it turns out, if you actually just read, this editor has repeatedly affirmed and privately and publicly that he is not a member of the Ku Klux Klan or any other secret organization, but when it comes to secret societies, he sees absolutely no difference between the KKK and many others, the Knights of Columbus, for instance. The Knights of Columbus has an oath just as binding or more so than the Ku Klux Klan. Moreover, the Knights of Columbus oath is not one half so American as is the Ku Klux Klan. If you charge that because why? Their oath is to what? The Vatican. They're not to American principles in the Constitution. The Ku Klux, the Knights of Columbus, their oath is to what? The Pope. If you charge that the KKK has put over mobs, I answer that the Knights of Columbus has put over 2 mobs to where any other secret organization on as Earth has ever put on one. They're saying once again, who's mentioning the Knights of Columbus? Fucking nobody. And the KKK is being like, well, they actually have foreign interests. They literally do. And they're actually, they subscribe to the ideals of a foreign entity, which they do, right? All of that, they're under the jurisdiction of the Pope. Basically, what this newspaper goes on to say is that all of the charges that were allegedly leveled at him, when they went to go find him, none of them held. Not one of them. And just like we read from a newspaper before. So all of this hoopla about the KKK being the worst people in the world and the fucking Negro haters and they're out lynching and shit like that, something's not right. Something's not making sense here. Seems like a lot of narratives and propaganda. All this indicates to Mr. Bob Schuler, editor of Schuler's magazine, that a nationwide crusade is being made by somebody against the KKK, that somebody is behind this attack, and then when that somebody is located, a great light will shine. The Ku Klux Klan has the same right to exist so long as it obeys the law that any other organization has. We have not heard of any investigations of the Knights of Columbus. The Ku Klux has the same right to exist as long as it obeys the law that any other organization has. We have not heard of any investigations of the Knights of Columbus. Although the un-American oaths are historic and their mob activities have been repeatedly published and heralded from platforms near and far. It is usually the lawless element that is found working secretly against the Klan. A lawless element being what? Well, as we know, what are lawless elements in our government right now when you look at the school shootings and things like that? So it seems like the same sort of thing that was going on now was going on back then, except they were doing it to who? Those evil, white, robed American patriots that were Protestants. Anyone who is at all well informed knows that the Knights of Columbus are simply the Jesuits under another name. Their cardinal doctrine is the end justifies the means, and that's true. The end always is the advancement of Roman Catholicism. The Ku Klux Klan is American patriotism organized to educate against the offset of Roman Catholicism in American politics. predominantly Protestant country, then you find out who's in the office. Number one, they put a bunch of blacks in there, right, that were uneducated and stuff like that. Then what else? You have Jewish representatives that don't give a shit about this country. Then you had Catholics that actually were, these were Jesuits that had their affiliation and their their patriotism or whatever, their connection to offshore. Not American Constitution, none of it. We give below an account of the investigation of the sub-Ku Klux Klan committee consisting of Senator Judge and etc. recently made at Columbia Spartanburg. They went to Spartanburg Union in Yorkville. The thing appears laughably superficial and futile. The climax of its absurdity is found in their statement of the social and political states of the people of York County. The committee, this sub Ku Klux committee, that's an absolutely superficial and laughable, the paper says. The committee says that the community in York County was found to be an almost utter social and political demoralization. The civil authorities being a useless farce and a mockery of the victims of the Ku Klux Klan. Oh my God, if you just hear what the newspaper said, it's just demoralization and destruction, and the KKK are running things, and there's no standards of morality, etc., etc., etc. And then the newspaper goes on to say, well, we resided for 4 years in the town of Yorkville and knew the people of all parts of the county of York and can partially say that we have never have met with a more law-abiding people. And we mean the good laws, of course. Pious and intelligent people, and then the people of that county. But read the statements which are made doubtless by one of the radical members of the committee. The account says, they first visited the capital, Columbia. More than 100 refugees who had fled from violence in various counties were there, and etc. And there was violence, and etc., etc. Newspapers were saying one thing. The people on the ground were saying the exact opposite. Who should we believe? Let's watch this. This is FBI, a guy from the FBI in the mid 50s or something like that, that was told that was an FBI informant that went specifically to there was a civil rights movement, and you'll listen, and these for 15 minutes the police, working in conjunction with whatever corrupt people, whatever, allowed these protesters or whatever to literally beat and these blacks or whatever for 15 minutes before the police stopped. And then they blamed it on the Ku Klux Klan. In other words, what I'm saying about that there's infiltration of the Ku Klux Klan and all of these actual lynchings that were going on and stuff like that were blamed on the Ku Klux Klan, weren't the Ku Klux Klan, this is what this guy is essentially saying, except fast forward into 1950s or whatever. Let's listen.
From December 2nd, 1975, we're going to show you a clip of a Ku Klux Klan FBI informant by the name of Thomas Rowe. He described how he participated in beatings of civil rights activists during the Freedom Riders movement in Birmingham, Alabama. Let's watch.
Right. In connection with the Freedom Riders incident that you mentioned, did you inform the FBI about planned violence prior to that incident?
Sir, I gave the FBI information pertaining to the Freedom Riders assault approximately 3 weeks before it occurred.
And what did you tell him?
I stated to him that I had been contacted by a Birmingham city detective who in turn wanted me to meet with a high-ranking officer of the Birmingham Police Department to set a reception for the Freedom Riders.
You mean the Birmingham policeman set up the beating of the Freedom Riders and you told the FBI that?
That's correct, sir.
And then were they beaten?
They were beaten very badly, yes.
And did the Birmingham police give you the time that they promised to give you to perform the beating?
Yes, sir. We were promised 15 minutes with absolutely no intervention from any police officer whatsoever.
In other words, the FBI let it happen. They orchestrated the whole thing, and then what? To cause race riots and that sort of stuff, and then blame the KKK. About the biggest huggaboo and most exaggerated, unfounded, unwarranted, senseless, sensational humbug that has ever been infiltrated on the county, on the country, in this or any other age, has its embodiment in what is known as the Ku Klux Klan. So the biggest huggaboo, most exaggerated, unfounded, unwarranted, senseless, sensational humbug that has ever been inflicted on the country is the KKK. This ideal rawhead and bloody bones organization is represented to have derived its origin from the sanguinary ghosts of the defunct rebellion existing in the dark and terrible gloomy caves whose awe-inspiring banners are inscribed with the ghostly motto of the skull and crossbones, whose mission is death, whose drink is blood, and whose flood consists of dead niggers and carpetbaggers. The favorite resort of this terrific monster is, of course, in the dismal caves and deep caverns of the southern state, where he fattens on loyal provender with impunity, sleeping by day and stealing forth by night in search of his innocent victims, and his appetite seems never appeased. He is continually munching up carpetbaggers or freedmen, and immediately preceding elections, he becomes exceedingly voracious. So basically, this is all the bullshit that's being said about the KKK. He is the scapegoat for all the sins and crimes committed south of the Mason-Dixon line. If a thieving carpetbagger happens to get his desserts meted out of him by proper punishment, in other words, the guy was being a total piece of shit, and you were like, look, you're out of line. For the commission of some characteristics mean act, the circumstances once magnified into a terrible KKK outrage. If a pilfering nigger happens to fall into a blind shaft while on a hen rooster raid and breaks his infernal neck, the pale corpus is exhibited to the sympathizing gaze of the loyal people as the fiendish work of the murderous Ku Klux Klan. So they're saying every newspaper of a pilfering nigger happens to fall into a blind shaft, they blame it on the KKK, and everybody believes it. They believe it to this day. The U.S. military are scattered all over the country for the ostensible purpose of suppressing this monster, or were the military dressing up in robes and then actually lynching Negroes and things like that and then blaming it on them? But in reality, to control elections and overawe law-abiding citizens, and the Ku Klux Klan has been made the pretext for nearly every outrage that has been perpetuated upon the Southern people. The Ku Klux Klan was peculiarly of a Southern origin, as was intended to counteract the Grand Army of the Republic and the Loyal League, and for better protection of the families of the Southern men from the depredation of the robbers turned loose in society after the war. Their object was to protect, not to depredate, to build up, not to destroy, to protect, not to depredate, to build up, not to destroy. As evidence of their motives, peace and good order, the oath which each member took upon himself was a pledge to support the Constitution as given by our forefathers and to protect the weak against the strong. Protecting the weak against the strong, by the way, is the constitutional, in the sense this feeling or whatever, this general feeling of our country, and that stems from Christianity. So when you go once again back to the Southern blacks, and you saw that a lot of these black slave owners were actually taking care of some of these blacks, that's exactly what they were. That's what their religion and what their constitution and what their country tells them to do. You are to protect the weak against the strong. So they took a lot of these blacks, brought them in, taught them, gave them skill sets, put a roof over their head, and then, as is according to the census records, there were some of them that let them fucking go and live as free men in their own country. The radical papers are eagerly seeking to manufacture a sensation about the alleged Ku Klux Klan in the South, attributing them to several outrages that have recently occurred in that section. There seems to be a concerted sending forward from the South to the Washington Chronicle accounts of outrages attributed to the Ku Klux Klan. And the Chronicle give them a telegraphic impetus throughout the North, accompanied by the pious ejaculation sent by the telegraph, Lord, Lord, oh, we must stop these people, and stuff like that, and it's all just drummed up. There appears to a strong desire to inflame the Northern people, afresh at this time against the South, making that whole community responsible for the alleged crimes of very absurd organization and laying at the doors of that organization every act of violence and outrage which occurs in any part of the South. In other words, anything that happens, pilfering black falls into a hole, it's the fucking KKK. Some papers, listen to this. This is the kind of shit that they were putting, and still do, put into people's minds about what these white Protestant people were doing. Do you think white Protestants were cannibals? Some papers have made light of this concern, but there is no light about it. We need to take this KKK very seriously, accepting blue lights with sulfurous smell when the terrible oath of membership is taken. Blue lights, a sulfurous smell is coming up from the ground whenever a KKK member takes an oath. As well as informed as the Journal in regard to this diabolic organization, we doubt whether it fully comprehends its numbers, the completeness of its organization, or its atrocious cannibal purposes. Cannibals. According to the last monthly return of membership and equipment, the membership comprises 50 million able-bodied men. That's what the papers are claiming. Fully armed and equipped, and so completely organized that within 48 hours the whole force can be under arms, and as the principal article of food is raw Negro. Blood and glotted gore subsistence can easily be provided, especially in the South. The papers were claiming that the Ku Klux Klan were getting out white Protestant Christians are cannibals. Does that make any fucking sense? Or were they drumming up some hysteria? And what did you hear of? It will be observed that according to this order, the Negro must be eaten raw. This is horrible. About as barbarous as the orders of the radicals and their followers have been. Their orders have been to swallow the Negro whole. Whether the Negro can be better managed by eating him raw than by swallowing him whole is more than we know, not having undertaken it, etc. Crazy. Absolutely insanity. We're going to suggest that the journal would do well to some state service if it was to introduce a bill to the Honorable Jacob Wolf. The honorable chosen man who hates every other religion and race besides his own religion, the Honorable Jacob Wolf. Maybe he should introduce a bill about how it's illegal to eat Negroes. Literally what the article says. Then you go to the American Jewish world, the newspapers then, and what did they say? This is hilarious. The Ku Klux Klan, a medieval eruption in our civic life, says Samuel Untermeyer. And right above that, it says, contemporary Jewish genius. They always like to pat. We're fucking so smart. God bless it. Contemporary Jewish genius. So, of course, the Jews were like, oh, we can't have this. Okay. We're going to finish now. Okay. This is about an 8-minute video, and it's H.K. Edgerton. And this actually comes from, I found this from James True. He did a series of videos like 4 years ago when I did the, literally in the same week that I did the Albert Pike, Fall of Albert Pike video. And this actually comes from him. Now, listen to what this guy has to say. This is, once again, a long video, and then we'll cut this off. We'll be done. So, but basically what this guy is, he's a black man, and he's pro-Confederacy, and he's basically telling you exactly what I told you today, in his own words, a black man, about the corruption of the government, what the government was doing, overthrowing the South, what was really going on in the South, the race relations of the South. You're going to hear it right from his words, okay? And it's pretty illuminating, okay? So this is H.K. Edgerton on the Confederacy, and then we will call this a day, okay?
I'm a Southerner, first of all. I have a great deal of faith in the South. I have a great deal of faith in our young generation, even though we say that they don't say yes sir, no ma'am, and they're not taught to say the Lord's Prayer. But I'm gonna tell you something, there's a resolve in Southern people, young and old, that will come a day that worm will turn, and the truth will be known here in the Southland of America about what happened. All you have to do is just say the word slavery, and it's been a situation where Christian white folks in the South have held their heads down, because the whole institution of slavery has been blamed solely on Christian white folks in the South, and the whole world acts as though it didn't participate, and the whole world did participate, and especially those Africans. And now children want to know real answers. They want to know why you sit and call.
Sorry, let me just stop that. I don't know if you just caught what he had to say, though. He's like, all the slavery, all over the world, white, black, you found slavery all over the world. But our history just tells us just those evil white men.
Their grandfathers, all these demonic and evil, they want to know these things. What people don't understand, see what has happened to us as Southerners for so long, we've been dumbed down, even with since Reconstruction, with the advent of the building of the Freedmen's Bureau in 1865, certainly the North knew that it had to come down here and propagandize the South. So it sent its teachers here, it dumbed our children down. They did everything they could do to divide and separate black folks and white folks in the Southland of America. You spent 150 years trying to wonder, why are we going through all these problems? Why all this hatred? 150 years we've lived in depression, bad rule, because, I don't know why some black folks think the northern folks have this great love for them. Those northern folks know history. They know about all those black folks who ran with white folks around here and fought and died and sniped and killed Yankees. They don't have no love. There's no love for them around here. Even though you might have won the battle on the field because you outnumbered us, you had repeater white rifles, you had soldiers of fortune you were bringing in from all over the place, in the hearts and minds of us, that thing still was there, the love for the Southland of America. So the only way, basically, that we could do this thing is to dumb down the people, and grab black folks and divide and separate them down in the South. We can't have those black folks around there voting with their Southern white family. What was the sense of going to war if we did that? So, and orchestrated, and this was very programmed. And people think this is a mistake or it's just something accidentally happened. This is an ongoing Cold War that was instituted by these folks from the North to divide and separate us.
An ongoing Cold War by the North to divide and separate. That's exactly what we talked about. That's exactly what all of the Southern papers say.
The biggest tragedy of all, the whole world wants to associate the Ku Klux Klan or any hate organization with my flag. These folks talked about Nathan Bedford Forrest. Well, if it don't be for Nathan Bedford Forrest and that original Ku Klux Klan, I'm not talking about what happened after Nathan Bedford Forrest, many of us Southerners, red, yellow, black, and white, would be just like the dinosaur around here in the Southland America, extinct.
If it wasn't for Nathan Bedford Forrest, the head of the KKK, that there wouldn't be he's basically saying protecting white, red, yellow, black folks all over. If it wasn't for them, the South would have been absolutely destroyed by the Northern armies and would have been extinct, is what he's saying. And he's crediting Nathan Bedford Forrest, the KKK, for protecting the South from this. That's what he's saying.
And people don't understand that. They just say Ku Klux Klan, and all of a sudden they gather these images of my flag and white men standing around beating and hanging and whipping black folks. Wrong, wrong, wrong. What about old man Pooley right around there in Alabama who joined the Ku Klux Klan because his family wanted to vote in the election and wanted to vote in the Democratic Party, and Thaddeus Stevens and his boys come down here and terrorize them in the fields and beat them. And many times he went to Ku Klux Klan. Thaddeus Stevens and his boys found out how successful that the Klan was at defending Southern folks, red, yellow, black, and white. So what did they do? They started sending their boys down here and dressing up like the Klan and committed terror in the South. And then all of a sudden, you know, Nathan Bedford Forrest understood this thing. He told his men, let's just come home.
Bunch of people dressed up, just as he's saying, dressed up as the Ku Klux Klan, causing chaos and disruption and stuff like that, to blame it on the Ku Klux Klan. It's exactly what they were saying.
Let's go home and forget about this thing. Out of all his black men that rode with him, he said every single one of my black men are as good as any soldier that rides with me. And I'll tell you something. From all the accounts of what you do find, there was not a single man that rode with Nathan Bedford Forrest who looked like me that wouldn't have given his life for Nathan Bedford Forrest. Trained cadre of black folks on plantations all across the Southland of America, made all the implements of war, stayed at home, provided all the foodstuffs. Many went off to fight in the war gloriously.
While white and black soldiers and Native American soldiers were fighting for the South, the blacks stayed in the South and helped the farms, helped continue to feed the population, literally helped the war effort. Were you taught that in school? Oh no, you weren't taught that in school, were you? No.
Slavery by some white men in the South, and I've heard it. I even heard some very rare recordings that Dr. Southall Freeman did, especially one Confederate soldier who said that slavery was a curse on the white people in the South. While slavery might have been a curse on the white folks in the South, it was a blessing for many of us who wear this color. Now some folks will say, well, Uncle Tom, what you talking about? But let me tell you something. When my great-great-grandmama Hattie Edgerton stood on those shores in 1788 on her way to the Honorable T.R. Edgerton family in Rutherford County, North Carolina, I'm so glad she didn't get left behind. Those Africans didn't like us then, they don't like us now. The only people that ever showed any love for us is those same white folks in those cotton fields and cornfields that we live side by side and call ourselves family. And I'm not here.
Lived side by side with white folks and called them family. And he's about to say, I'm not here to defend slavery, but what he just got done saying was basically, hey, there's a bunch of white people that said slavery was a curse. Why? Well, because it's once again, it sowed the seeds of disunion. And as he's saying, there's a bunch of blacks that were saying slavery was a blessing for us. Why? Because it took us out of the hellhole that we were in and actually brought us up as civilized people. And he was saying that there was a harmony of people back in the day in the South. And he's not advocating for slavery, but he's saying that this was actually what happened. That's it.
A defendant institution of slavery because slavery was bad when Jesus Christ walked the earth. It's part of man's inhumanity to man. It crosses all colors, all religions. We can't embrace our heritage, our ancestry, because the bottom line is this here. Yankees don't want you to know the truth. If you know the truth, you got to pay back all that stealing. A lot of folks got to pack the bags. You got to give back all the honor that you took from black folks and white folks around here in the Southland of America. I am so very, very proud of my heritage and my ancestry. God, in his infinite wisdom, could have sent my grandmama someplace else as a slave. But he sent her to the greatest country. He sent her to the Southland of America.
I could have been sent anywhere. My mama could have been sent to anywhere to been a slave. What does that tell you? I guess that slavery was going on in lots of other places in the country or in the world, knowingly, of course. And that he could have been stuck in some other third world country or whatever. But then he's saying, hey, I'm proud. I came to the greatest country in America. And guess what? Many of those blacks fought side by side with white people against the North. That's what he's saying.
And I sure am so very glad for that. If it hadn't have been for the skills that white folks taught black folks around here, that so-called freedom that we got with the second 13th Amendment, when they just set folks loose and said, now you're free. Free to go where, to do what? If it hadn't been for that white master said, come in here, sit down, John. They burned out all our property, our money is no good, all the animals are gone, but we family. Let's work together to make this thing survive and work again. And they did. And they did.
Pretty illuminating, huh? Pretty enlightening, pretty illuminating. Okay, we're going to wrap this baby up. So that just goes to show you there. He's like, after the South, he was like literally saying that after the South Reconstruction totally destroyed, these white people came back and it's like, let's build. Then you also know that many of those black slaves, after the Civil War, went back and worked for those white people. Voluntarily. They were free. They didn't have to. But then he was saying, well, where were we going to go? We had our home here. We were living in harmony with one another. That's not what we were taught, though. Let's end it with this. Now we fast forward to, basically 70 years ago, something like that, when you have, race relations and things like that going in America. And things are getting pretty heated, right? We had this civil rights, and of course that was all planned. Of course, they wanted the blacks and whites to fight to the fucking death. Goy. This is a Jewish newspaper in 1955. The Klan rides again, the Southern Jewish Weekly. On August 22nd, 1955, the Southern Association of Attorney Generals issued a formal statement opposing any rebirth of the Ku Klux Klan. So, once again, 1890, whatever it was, 96 to whatever it was, 1871 or whatever, basically had the dissolution of the Klan. Then it comes back up in 1910, goes for a while, right, that sort of thing. And then, of course, it starts to peter out and things like that because of all the propaganda and everything like that. Then you had a resurgence of it in the South in 1955 because, once again, those people in the South understood their fucking history. You didn't, I didn't, all of us didn't, right? I mean, unless you were properly educated, but... In order to evade a subversive listing, Edwards organized his group as the U.S., basically literally started the group again, the U.S. Klans, Knights of the Ku Klux Klan, etc., has received approval from the Attorney General. Of course, the Georgia Attorney General was going to have to approve that because it's absolutely legal. There's nothing, there's literally no laws that say that they can't come together as a secret fraternal organization. Nothing. On April 11th, handbills, this is according to a Jewish paper, handbills were distributed on the streets of Macon, Georgia, reading in part, for Aryan Knights of the Ku Klux Klan religion to arrest the flames of Bolshevism. So eventually, these KKK members figured out who was actually behind all these newspapers. And they're like, there's definitely a Roman, Catholic Jesuit contingent here. There's no question about that. But who's actually in control of it? Are you an Aryan citizen? Are you a Klansman? If not, why not? Here are the tenets of the Ku Klux Klan religion. Aryan, formerly called white supremacy. For a closer relationship between the Aryan race and the Ku Klux Klan religion of pure undefiled Americana. This is what we stand for. Protection of Aryan ladyhood. Preventing the causes of mob violence and lynchings. Preventing foreign agitation. Preventing fires and destruction of human lives and property by lawless elements. You know of any wildfires that are going on now? I wonder if they were dealing with that in 1955 or 1910 or 1860. Old world, anyone? Stop foreign immigration. You mean the problem that's literally within every white country right now? Interesting. Kill the United Nations Charter. That's my favorite one. Fuck the UN. Separation of segregation of Christianity and Romanism and Judaism. Us American white Protestants don't want your Roman fucking Catholic dictates, and we don't want your Bolshevik Judaism. Separation of church and synagogue. And 48 state governments in the District of Columbia expose suppression of free speech, free press. Is that a problem today? Please remember that this is big capital fucking letters here, just to let you know. Please remember that every Roman or Jewish-controlled newspaper is fighting the Ku Klux Klan religion. Shall you exchange your Aryan birthright for a mess of Romanism and Talmudism? And that's the Jew Zionist way of life. The qualifications for the membership in the Ku Klux Klan religion shall be: an applicant must be a white, male, Aryan person, a native born of the 48 state republics or District of Columbia of the segregated union, who owes no allegiance or any nature or degree whatsoever to any foreign government. Wow, that's just, I can't believe that. Why would they do that? A believer in the tenets of the Ku Klux Klan religion. If you're an Aryan man, you need the Ku Klux Klan religion, and the Klan needs you. Join now. Right for information. Okay. And that's it. We're going to cut this baby.